Good morning again. I'd like to call the Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bopey? Here. Mr. Castillo?
Here.
Dr. Davis? Here. Ms. Ellis? Ms. Ellis is not present. Mr. Garvey?
Here.
Ms. Holloway?
Here.
Mr. Melrin?
Here.
Mr. Morris?
Here.
Ms. Orange Jones? Ms. Orange Jones is not present. Mr. Rock? Mr. Rock is not present. Ms. Gaucher? Here. Ms. Clifton? Here. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you, ma'am. This morning we have a number of recognition of guests. I'd like to turn it over to our state superintendent to lead us with those. All right. Okay.
Your consent agenda is ready for approval, adding items 6.2 through 6.5.
Is there, okay, there's a motion from Ms. Bush and a second by Dr. Davis. Any objection to the motion? Motion passes.
Your first item is on page 1, item 2.1, consideration of the recognition of the National Homeless Liaison of the Year. The recommendation is to recognize.
All right, great. Dr. Rowan.
Yeah, thank you. And I thank the board for allowing us the opportunity to recognize some individuals this morning due to scheduling. And sometimes we do this on, most of the time we do this on Wednesday, but some of this needs to be integrated today. So to make a recognition for homeless liaison of the year, I'm asking Mr. Bernard Cook to come forward and make a brief presentation.
Good morning, board, and Dr. Brown. Bernard Cook with the department. The honor is mine at this time to present to you two individuals who have received national awards for servicing one of our most vulnerable populations, and that is our students who experience homelessness. The National Association for the Education of Homeless Children and Youth is a national organization that is dedicated to ensuring educational equity and excellence for children experiencing homelessness. Each year, the organization accepts nominations from across the country in search of the homeless liaison for the state coordinator and who have exemplified extraordinary talents in fulfilling the McKinney-Vento federal law. From the nominations that are submitted from various states, the National Committee reviews the packages and awards one homeless liaison of the year and one state coordinator of the year. The nominees must have a minimum of 3 years' experience working with their position, must clearly understand the challenges faced by children, youth, and families, including unaccompanied youth and preschool-age children. They must be recognized as an expert in the field and exemplify leadership and innovation regarding implementation of the McKinney-Vento Homeless Act. For the first time in history, Louisiana brought home both national awards at the 34th Annual National Conference held in San Diego, California in December. I ask that the honorees please stand when I call your name. Homeless Liaison of the Year, Ms. Quintina Brown from the Foosh Parish. And our State Homeless Coordinator of the Year is Dr. Antiqua Hunter. Congratulations to Ms. Quintina Brown and Dr. Hunter. Thank you for your awesome work.
All right. And I think now we have one more.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read it.
Go ahead.
Your next item is on page 2, item 2.2, consideration of the recognition of Louisiana Beta Club leadership. The recommendation is to recognize.
All right. There's a motion by Mr. Melrin and a second by Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. So our beta members, both in junior and senior beta throughout the state, do excellent work. And they also have excellent leadership from the sponsors that are here with them today. And also would like to recognize Superintendent Bochet for many years supporting Beta through the state of Louisiana. But at this time, Dr. Keith Leger, who is the state Beta chair, will make some remarks and recognize some very important Beta members to the state of Louisiana.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. The National Beta Club was founded in 1934 by Dr. John Harris, a professor at Woolford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Today, there are more than 445,000 active members and more than 9,600 clubs nationally and internationally. It has become the nation's largest independent nonprofit educational youth organization. The mission statement of the Beta Club is to promote the ideals of academic achievement, character, service, and leadership among elementary and secondary school students. In Louisiana, there are 943 clubs and 45,340 members. Each year, over 16,000 students, sponsors, and parents attend the Louisiana State Conventions, at which students participate in almost 200 unique competitions, including academic tests, performance art. Let me back up. Academic tests. Y'all, students are volunteering to take tests at these conventions. Performance arts, officer campaigns, quiz bowl, speech, creative writing, engineering, living literature, robotics, show choir, and numerous other creative arts categories. It is my privilege and honor as Louisiana Beta Club State Council Chair to recognize our current Louisiana Beta Club officers, leadership representatives, and the state sponsors are as follows. Wyatt Cobb, Elementary President. Malika Isa, Elementary Vice President. Mia Paige Cunningham, Junior Vice President. Zoriel Tabo, Junior President. Callie Townsend, Junior Leadership Rep. Maya Worley, Junior Secretary. Ada Grace Hebert, Senior Secretary. Mila Johnson, Senior Vice President. Carly LeBlanc, Senior Leadership Rep. Barrett LeBon, Senior Leadership Rep. And Mason McCart, Senior President and National President. Joining our student officers and leadership reps will be our state sponsor and state sponsors elect. Y'all, these folks put in numerous hours. They love the Beta Club. They love our students. And without these folks, Beta Club would not exist. Nikki Clark, Elementary State Sponsor elect. Ethan Darnell, Senior State Sponsor elect. Jennifer DeSarmo, Junior State Sponsor. Christy Hebert, Junior State Sponsor elect. Aaron March, Elementary Incoming State Sponsor. Shanna Moses, Senior Sponsor elect. Our very own Ashley Townsend, Elementary State Sponsor. And Emily Segura, Senior State Sponsor. Thank you all, and I think maybe a picture is what's shown.
Board members, why don't we line up behind them to take a picture with them?
The president has spoken.
Maybe push the chairs.
Superintendent, I'd be remiss if I also didn't mention that we have another state council member who's with us here, Mr. Ken Worsham, longtime educator in Louisiana. Thank you, Ken, for being here.
That's really fantastic. Congratulations again. Right, there's no objection to that last motion to recognize. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 3, item 2.3, consideration of the recognition of Purple Star Schools. The recommendation is to recognize.
Is there a motion? Mr. Mullerin, Ms. Busher. Right, Mr. Superintendent.
Yes, sir. So this is more than a recognition. This is actually a direct result of policy implementation, most recently of this board. We worked legislatively, and we were able, with the help, I believe, of Senator Milligan out of the Shreveport area, to pass a resolution relative to recognition of military schools in the state of Louisiana, military-friendly schools. And we wanted to do this, and we got a lot of support legislatively to be able to create this particular recognition program. And this board then adopted that into our own rules. And so today we have our first opportunity to recognize a set of schools throughout the state of Louisiana that are being intentional around their support for military families. And we all know that our military families take on additional challenges in service to our country. And that's not simply and only the member of the military, but it's those students that are family members, it's those spouses. And so schools that embrace those families deserve a little extra recognition. And so that's why we were so excited about creating the Purple Star program to recognize those schools. And so at this point, Dr. Singleton will make some remarks about the program and make our first set of recognitions based on best policy of Purple Star schools in the state of Louisiana.
Good morning. In addition to serving the department as Assistant Superintendent, I am also the Military Interstate Children's Compact Louisiana Commissioner. I am one of 50 individuals across the country who serve military students to make sure they have academic opportunities as they transition from one state to the other. The Purple Star Award shows recognition to schools that show the commitment to serving students and families connected to the United States Armed Forces. This award is a result of Senate Concurrent Resolution 15 of the 2021 regular legislative session and subsequent vested policy passed in December 2021, directing the department to create this settlement. To earn the recognition, schools must do the following: designate a staff member to serve as a military liaison to serve specific needs of military-connected students and families, create a dedicated webpage featuring resources for military-connected students and families, create a student-led transitional program to provide peer support for military-connected students. The school system must adopt a resolution stating a commitment to military-connected students and families and have a designated central office staff person serve as a contact for school-based liaison. As a result of earning the Purple Star status, the school is provided a certificate, a digital badge, and a newly released today Purple Star banner. We also have a resolution from LDOE investing. This morning, we would like to recognize schools who have earned Purple Star status from 3 school systems. At this time, I will read the resolution. As I call the school's name, honorees, please stand when announced. Following the announcement, all of the recipients are asked to come forward for a group photo. Whereas military members and military families make many sacrifices for the safety and security of our nation, and whereas our military families help sustain our fighting force and communities must emphasize and recognize the critical role of dependents while their parents serve our nation, and whereas as educators, we are committed to serving children and families connected to the United States Armed Forces and providing a high-quality education for all students in Louisiana schools. And whereas the Purple Star Award program recognizes military-friendly schools that have demonstrated a major commitment to military-connected students and families. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Louisiana Department of Education and the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education convene at the April 2023 meeting in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and do hereby express its sincere appreciation and gratitude to Belle Chase Academy, Vernon Parish, and Loja Parish schools for the dedicated public service and commitment to the aforementioned areas. And be it further resolved that the Louisiana Department of Education and the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education do hereby convey upon the following schools the distinction of Purple Star School as they continue in duty and fulfillment to students, families, and military service. Apollo Elementary School, Belle Chase Academy, Benton Elementary School, Benton Intermediate School, Benton Middle School, Cope Middle School, Curtis Elementary School, Elm Grove Middle School, Kingston Elementary School, Leesville High School, Legacy Elementary School, Parkway Elementary School, Parkway High School, Platt Elementary School, Rose Pine High School, Rushian Middle School, Stockwell Place Elementary School, Sun City Elementary School, W.T. Lewis Elementary School, Louisiana, showing our recognition to our military-connected families and students. And we also have a resolution that we will present to each school system, signed by Dr. Brumley and Dr. Boffey as well. And we also have a banner that we'll display, and we'll ask all of our recipients to come down for a group photo.
Thank you.
It's taller than me, our niece. Thank you.
One public comment card from Mr. Eric Westone with the U.S. Army. Mr. Westone?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Major Eric Whetstone. I'm the recruiting
The
officer.
microphone just a little bit closer to you.
Sorry, I was speaking. With that, my name is Eric Whetstone. I am the executive officer for recruiting operations out of the U.S. Army for Louisiana. To all the state, I want to say thank you very much for the support of this Purple Day, especially as a father of 2 school-aged children in the Ascension Parish. I can't tell you how excited my children were to get the message last night to wear purple and thrilled it was about them. But showing the support for them, I really appreciate it. And what I ask is in the future, is continue the support of ASVAB testing in your schools. So the Army has a lot of programs that we offer for all the individuals and good careers out there, as well as bonuses. But the ASVAB is a way to get those folks cognitive tests, and it's free, that they can use to place them in careers that they may not be, they may not have a goal outside of college and universities. But I thank you for your support in doing that. So.
Great. Thank you, sir. I take it there are no other public comments, no objections. Just for completeness sake, we did not get a motion on item 2.1 to recognize Holloway, Brophy. Any objections to that motion? That motion passes. Right, next item, please.
next item is on page 14, item 4.1, consideration of course choice providers for Jumpstart Summers programs for 2023. The recommendation is to approve Ianville and DeSoto parishes beginning with the summer 2023.
All right, now get a motion, please. Ms. Boucher moves, Ms. Holloway seconds. Thank you. Is there a presentation or anything else? All right, any objections to that motion? Any comments? Motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 16, item 4.2, consideration of updates regarding current course choice Jumpstart providers. The recommendation is to approve the reauthorization of Allen, Madison, and Vermilion Parish school systems as successful course choice Jumpstart Summers providers and receive the course choice Jumpstart Summers providers status report.
That is a motion by Dr. Bofi, second by Mr. Mullerin. Any presentation, no public comments. Any objection? All right, no objection, motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 18, item 4.3, consideration of an update report regarding special education funding and key performance indicators. The recommendation is to receive.
Motion, please. Mr. Morris moves, Ms. Holloway seconds. I think, let's see, any presentation?
Yes, sir.
All right, good deal. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. We just wanted to take this opportunity to give the board an update on some of our work relative to special education initiatives in our state. As you all know, last year there was an $8 billion allocation for special ed cameras in classrooms upon parent request. We'll talk briefly about that. We'll probably talk a little bit here too about our special education leadership fellowship program, where we continue to train incoming special ed leaders. We started this a few years ago and now are in several cohorts in. And also, Ms. Mary Jordan will make a presentation relative to other financial obligations and academic endeavors that we're working through in service to our students with exceptionalities. So, Ms. Mary Jordan.
Good morning. Meredith Jordan, Executive Director of Diverse Learners here at the department. And I'm happy to be here this morning to give you an update on our ITA funding, a few specific initiatives and special ed key performance indicators, all geared toward one goal in our state to improve outcomes for these students. And so I'll start with some funding information. A little bit of this may be a follow-up to my presentation in October. So in order to make the most of our funding each year, school systems plan for how to improve student learning in the upcoming year. And so last January, we released guidance documents specifically around this for our school system leaders and for our special education directors to support them. We embed this support in our SPED Fellow Academy for new and upcoming SPED directors, for SPED directors during our monthly calls, our office hours, as well as our federal programs directors at various meetings geared toward that audience. And so during this year's planning cycle, our team also made extra intentional effort to notify school systems to take full advantage of additional competitive opportunities to support their students with disabilities. And so this planning process depicted here involves reviewing student achievement progress data, establishing those priorities, both aligned to our Louisiana priorities and their school system level priorities, building a budget aligned to these priorities using all available funding sources. So really ensuring children receive the supports they deserve requires that ongoing data-driven decision-making, responding to their student and to their community needs. So our goal here is to build a seamless support system using data to align those budgets. So in order to empower our school system and school leaders, our grant administrators and SPED leaders to maximize the use of their federal and state dollars, we have to provide that information on how to do this, how to use these funds either independently or together to meet specific identified student and staff needs. And so I'm a visual person. I love this video on how it shows how we think about this and how the various federal fund streams can be used to advance a common local school system strategy or specific initiative. And so you'll see there on the right, we can be driven toward a priority, an initiative, and how all of those fund streams can work together and be braided to support that. So to also continue our funding discussion from October, IDA provides formula grants to assist our states in meeting the excess cost of providing SPED and related services to our children with disabilities. Funds under this federal formula grant are combined with their state and local funds to provide that free and appropriate public education to our children. Most IDA federal funds provided to states are passed directly through to our school systems. Labeled here in this chart as our state flow-through funds. We also sometimes call them sub-grantee funds. And these also included our one-time emergency ARP funds, which you also see here, which all directly flow through to our school systems. A very small portion determined by OSIP is used as state set-aside. That's the top row shown in this chart. Our set-aside application and funding activities are determined alongside our stakeholders. We start 6 months in advance. We've been in our current process since January to work alongside our stakeholders, really get their input on how we should use our state funding to support our school systems. And that application is due every May. But you will see here in this chart, that top row indicates our state set-aside. So this provides just a brief overview of our IDA-specific funds that help meet those excess costs. The timeline at the bottom of this slide also depicts the 27-month spending cycle for IDA funds, so I know that has been a concern and some understanding needed there. So you see the overlap here in the timeline whereby a school system will have 2 grant cycles open at the same time. So currently school systems will have their 21-22 money open, and you will see here they will have their 22-23 funding cycle almost open. And I'll dive a little bit more into that on the next slide. But by and large, IDA funding is spent on salaries, personnel, related services, contracted services to provide things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, counseling service, etc. So the biggest need for our school systems around these funds is funding and paying their staff salaries. So let's focus in and dive into the IDA flow-through funds that systems receive and look at the current 2 fund periods they have available. So they have 21-22 and 22-23 money currently available. They receive these funds for both K-12 students, so you'll see that in the top chart for IDA 611. And they also receive flow-through funds for their youngest children with disabilities, 3 to 5, so their preschool kiddos. That's their IDA 619 funding. This chart shows those amounts in our state for the 21-22 and the 22-23. And all of these funds are currently fully budgeted, and they're in the process of expending those and drawing down those reimbursements to those federal funds. These balances, just so that you know, are as of March 1st when I pulled fund stream reports. So these may have changed. These additional reimbursements, they may have drawn down additional reimbursements since May, so those balances may actually be lower at this point. So for 21-22 amounts, you'll see the fund stream report for this year showed a beginning total of $69 million, whereas the total flow through was $180 million from the previous slide. So this shows you the carryover there, right? So the $69 million for 21-22, those funds were awarded in 21. We're currently in 22-23. So it shows you about, if I do my math right, 35% or so was carried over to this year. And they are still allowed to continue to reimburse those and draw those down through September 30th in the next couple of months, September 30th, 2023. And so they have, and the funds must be spent by September 30th, services delivered, products received, and then they have until December to fully liquidate. So Ed gives them a couple of months to continue to draw down. The 2022-2023 funds that you see listed here are available through September 30th, 2024. So hopefully that paints a clear picture of the 27-month funding cycle for these IDEA funds. So I also wanted to show you all our current IDA ARC fund balances. And so again, these were one-time funds. So that's why you only see the one fund row here for 21-22 because that was the award year. It was signed into law to address the impact of the pandemic. All of these funds flowed straight through to our school systems and were designed to assist with either safely reopening their schools or addressing learning loss, learning acceleration, specifically for students with disabilities. And so again, these balances shown are as of March 1st. These funds are fully budgeted. School systems have through this September 30th to spend these, and through December to submit the reimbursement claims. And so again, we have work to do here to get our school systems to fully draw down and reimburse these funds, and to do so by September the 3rd. And these particular funds, just so that you know, they follow the same guidelines as school systems IDA formula funds. So the same allowable costs and expenses were allowable for the emergency IDEA funds. We did provide guidance to school systems on spending down these funds, and of course, try to discourage them, even though it was allowed, discourage spending any full-time salaries here, because again, they expire September 30th, and we're limited funds here. And so, reviewing our financial data, receiving feedback from both the public and from our stakeholder group, we've worked alongside, our federal programs team as well, to put forward some next steps. So what this shows us is we want to put in some more regular guidelines for school systems to draw down these funds. They submit reimbursement requests in our electronic grants management system to the department to claim these reimbursement expenditures for IDEA. And then they have periodic expense reports that provide a summary of all of the expenses that they have claimed during that particular quarter. And so in January, we began receiving feedback from a stakeholder group, working with federal programs directors, IDA directors at the table, business managers, charter representation around timely submission of these reimbursement requests. So LEAs need to draw down their funds timely and regularly, both for accuracy and for public transparency. In October, I shared with the public how to access this information on the EGMS system for our school systems. Stakeholders can access fund award amounts and budget details for all of these funds. And so we've already alerted school systems of the new requirement to draw down these reimbursements at least quarterly. And so beginning at the end of March, quarter 3 for us, the department began sending notifications where these expenditure reports and reimbursements were needed from LEAs. Weekly notifications will be sent until those are submitted to really support them and remind them to work with their business managers and finance teams to do this. And then beginning January 2024, we may begin to add conditions, what we call conditions, to the LEA's grant award notification, which would be indicated by a lack of adherence to our expectation here with drawdowns and our LDOE reimbursement claim guidelines. And so it's our intent these more regular communication and reminders are going to help school systems to submit their reimbursements more frequently, make sure that it's on their radar, and that we're being fully transparent about the funds and what's truly available. I also wanted to cover some of our ESSER investments here. We've got a lot of ESSER funds that are impacting all students, and I pulled out some of our ESSER investments that are specifically making a big impact on our students with disabilities. We've got a couple of key ones here. So our ELA guidebook accessibility investment at just over $500,000 is providing funds to make revisions to our ELA guidebook curriculum to include additional supports, built-in supports for diverse learners, so that teachers don't have to go look for another guidance document about how to support their diverse learners in ELA. So these supports are going to include additional optional lessons and activities to support these students, providing teachers with some autonomy on how to best individualize and scaffold lessons and supports. Also, really specifically building in just-in-time supports into that lesson. So as I am planning to support all students in my classroom, I can make some specific adjustments to that lesson based on suggestions right there in the curriculum for how to scaffold and support my student with a disability, or English learner for that matter, right there in the curriculum. And I'm going to tie these investments to some key performance indicators in just a bit. So the second one that we have here, our Recruitment, Recovery, and Retention Task Force approved a recommendation to expand our parent-to-teacher model. We have invested $500,000 in this initiative, and we've got currently over 600 paraprofessionals enrolled in REACH to gain their teaching certification. We have another cohort that is going to start in the fall. And we know that some of those are going to come out and have special education certification, so we're excited about that work there and what it's going to do for our special education workforce. And the third ESSER investment shown here is a significant one, $2.9 million, aimed to build capacity for our workforce, again, increasing the number of certified special educators. And this started last year during our school system planning process. We had about 109 school systems request funding for approximately 730 educators to receive special education certification. So the implementation of this work would begin this year, 22-23. But keep in mind, that's going to take educators possibly 2 to 3 years. If I'm a full-time educator, getting the coursework necessary to add on that certification. So we're expecting this investment to pay off in the next 2 to 3 years. And again, I'm going to connect these to some KPIs in just a bit. So let's talk about our SPED camera implementation update. As requested, it provides an update on our SPED camera implementation across the state. In October, if you remember, you all approved our $8 million of legislative funding, not IDA funding, legislative funding to support the implementation of cameras in certain special education classrooms across Louisiana. And so we launched a survey in February, received 69 respondents. So I'll make a really clear caution here that that's a low response rate. We had lots of surveys going on, but just keep that in mind here. So 69 school systems who responded. Based on those respondents, just under 10%, so $787,000 has been spent of that $8 million. Also, this is early implementation. You all approved those allocations in October. School systems had those likely November or December. And so the survey was sent out in February. We're talking a couple of months of implementation, right? What this does tell us is that of those respondents, 37 parent requests were reported, 37 requests were approved by school systems. There were no requests based on our respondents that were reported as they denied that parent a camera. We're going to launch additional data collection in May that will go through a more formal process through EGMS, where school systems annually will tell us that implementation update, and I would be certainly happy to share that with you all on an annual basis in June so that we can get full year reports each year. What is our update that year with regard to this implementation?
There, just a point here, there is in EGMS, there is a portal that has been developed that in May, systems will begin to go in and provide their actual information on camera implementation. This was just a survey, a snapshot in time, but beginning in May and through the summer, they'll have to go into that portal and actually add their special ed camera information.
Yes, and they will have to upload their receipts and their documentation for those expenses.
So that'll be required. Thank you.
Okay, so funding, both state and local, is one key lever that we have to help improve and impact outcomes for our students with disabilities. That funding should drive us toward key improvements and key outcomes. So I'll walk us through some key performance indicators, many of which are aligned to our annual IDA federal reporting, but set a few as requested state-determined targets based on some of the investments that we've talked about. So our state and local funding should ensure that Louisiana's diverse learners have the individualized supports along their educational journey. So funding must support instructional strategies, intentional educator development. Our funding has to foster strong partnerships through stakeholder engagement, and our funding must support compliance. Annually, states report on the topics that you see listed here. Some are more compliance measures, some are student outcome measures. Every year, our submission uses the previous year's performance data. So for example, the most recent data that you'll see reflected here in these indicators reflects school year 2021-2022 performance. So I've bolded here on this slide, and I'll call them out. The areas where I've pulled out some key performance indicators to share with you today. So we'll talk about assessment performance for students with disabilities, graduation rate, parental involvement, and our post-school outcomes. It's also important to note that we just went through a target setting process alongside our stakeholders and our state advisory panel for the next 5 years. That is not to say that we cannot work with stakeholders to also, as we should, constantly analyze this data together and make updates to our federal targets. Educators, support staff, our administrators, our families, they have much to be proud of in terms of learning acceleration and learning recovery evident in our state. So, like I said, I'm going to stay on this slide because some of the most important performance indicators, I believe, lie right here. So directly connected to our state goals and priorities, we want to ensure that our students with disabilities are considered proficient in ELA and mathematics. In our most recent federal submission in February, you will see indicated here in the yellow column, we met our ELA and math targets for these kids in 5 out of the 6 areas. The first in years that we've met our assessment performance targets. And you'll see, I'm very visual, so I put check marks. But for 8th grade math, we increased 1%, but we didn't quite make it to 6. And the feds don't round up. So it's also important to note here, while these targets may seem low, we're talking in our state, proficiency means mastery. So these are students with disabilities who scored mastery or advanced. And so we attribute these academic successes to the targeted priority work of our state and our school systems, our work around staffing and scheduling, providing equitable access to intervention during the school day, and extra time for our students with disabilities to master content, our accelerating learning work, high-dose tutoring initiatives, our statewide literacy support and initiatives, the investment that you saw around ensuring our ELA curriculum is accessible and that we're helping educators to design scaffolded and differentiated lessons in ELA. So you see some of those results impacted here. And so that's just to name a few. So what we also recognize is that gaps remain. Gaps, achievement gaps for our non-disabled students and our students with disabilities, those achievement gaps are still there. And so we still have much work to do moving forward, and we'll continue to do just that. But I do believe that increasing achievement starts with just believing that we can as a state and believing that these kids can achieve. So another goal is for the vast majority of our students with disabilities to graduate with a regular high school diploma. And you'll see here, so that target is indicated here on the first row. In 2021-2022, nearly 75%, 74.72% of students with disabilities exited high school with a regular diploma. You will note we fell a bit here, but we do expect to see, continue to see an increase with this outcome, and our 2022-2023 target is 80%. So we will, and our stakeholders believed in keeping this bar high for our students. We have in many years past met that target, but we're going to continue to push it up, okay, and to move forward. But I do believe it's still to be celebrated that the vast majority of our students with disabilities do graduate with a regular high school diploma. The next three performance indicators here on this slide are all captured from transition surveys captured by our LEAs annually on how many students with disabilities are enrolled in higher ed within 1 year, how many are competitively employed within 1 year, how many are in a post-secondary training opportunity or some other employment. And so this paints the picture of what the day after high school currently looks like for our students with disabilities. And so the second row shows the number who are enrolled in higher ed. And it shows that we increased slightly, with 33% of our students with disabilities enrolled in higher ed in 21-22. We didn't meet our target here, but again, we're going to keep pushing to increase. We'd like to see this much higher and closer to the percent of students graduating with a regular high school diploma that they're then enrolling in higher ed. The third row shows how many students are enrolled in higher ed or competitively employed, so it combines those two. So if a student is enrolled in higher ed or they are competitively employed, they're included in that indicator. And in 21-22, we were at 65.66, and our target is 74.5. So we really want to increase this such that if the student doesn't enroll in higher ed, that they do have a competitive employment opportunity. And lastly, the final row shows the percent of these students who are in higher ed, competitively employed, or they are enrolled in some other training program. For example, some of our students with more significant disabilities enroll in a local day program or some other training. Those numbers would be captured here. And so you'll see we increased in that last row. So currently we have nearly 89% of our kids with disabilities who the day after high school are enrolled in higher ed, are competitively employed, or in some training opportunity. And we have a lot of key work that's supporting our post-school outcome data. So we'll continue with our April Done Act implementation and ensuring that our students with disabilities have all those opportunities to graduate with a regular diploma. Collaboration with CTE and making sure these students also have inclusive opportunities even within their career and tech ed programs in their systems. And then also, interestingly, last legislative session, we had the Post-Secondary Inclusive Education Alliance legislation, which added funding for our higher ed institutions to create inclusive programs in colleges for even our students with significant disabilities. So I believe that we will also see some of our students with significant disabilities who are now able to be included in that second row and enroll in higher ed and in an institution, which is amazing for our state that we're opening those opportunities for students. This particular KPI is around educator development, and a few ESSER investments I spoke of earlier, like I said, will impact this particular target. Now, this is not a federal target. This is one, as requested, we looked at the number of educators obtaining certification to support students with disabilities, and because we are investing money there, wanted to track it and start looking at these numbers and how our workforce is advancing. And so remember those investments were our parent-teacher model and then the additional funding for our school systems to pay for current educators to add on special education certification and take some of those very specific courses to help better serve these students. And so, like I said, the impacts from some of those investments will begin, they began this year. They'll conclude in the 2025-2026 school year, just based on the number of years it will take those educators to receive those add-on certifications. So we'll see some additional impact here. In 2020-2021, we awarded 880 new special education certifications that year. In 2021-2022, we awarded 805 new special ed certifications that year. This is a decline that has trended over years, hence the investments and the dedication there. So you'll see my state target is hopefully we certify at least the same amount this year. That would be a win for us in our state. And like I said, in 23, 24, and 24, 25, I would expect us to increase this. So now I'm going to pivot to some stakeholder targeted KPIs. Stakeholder engagement has been and continues to be a priority for the department and for our team. One of our federal targets, so both of these that you see here are federal targets that we report to OSIP annually. One of our federal targets around this is the percent of parents who respond to a parent survey that their schools facilitate parent involvement well as a means of improving services and results for their children. So in 2020-2021, 86.88% of parents reported this. And in 2021-2022, 82.85% of parents reported their satisfaction. And the respondent rate there for 21-22, we had 589 parents who responded to that survey. And so that equates to 488 of those parents who reported their satisfaction. So you'll see we fell 4% there, and while we know our systems are the closest to our parents and must continue to improve the way we serve and work alongside them, we're going to continue state efforts to do the same. The next target here is the percent of resolution sessions resolved through settlement agreement. And so these are the numbers of complaints that go through our most adversarial due process and go before an administrative law judge. A due process hearing is a formal court-like proceeding where parties present their evidence to an independent administrative law judge to resolve those disputes between the parents of a child with a disability and the school system. And so I specifically put here, because you'll see, we didn't meet this target. Our target stays at 75%. We want it high, but I wanted to put the numbers here because it's really difficult, and I think it paints a different picture when you look at percents versus these very low numbers. So we had 22 requests for due process. 9 of those were resolved through a settlement agreement. So went to that court-like proceeding and were resolved in a settlement agreement. So let me tell you and kind of explain what happens to the other, 13 of those. So of the remaining 13, some of those were withdrawn or dismissed by the parent or the parent's attorney because they chose to, within 30 days, they can work alongside their school system in what we call early resolution and resolve those outside of the formal court-like process. But for transparency and federal reporting, we have to report that 22 due processes were requested, even though some of those were thrown out before they got to, or resolved, not resolved before they ever went to that court-like process. So I think it's important here as we're looking at percentages, but when we're looking at really small numbers, to also really talk about what those really small numbers mean. And so, LEAs, parents, their attorneys, They're using our built-in dispute resolution processes. They can and should work collaboratively to resolve these disagreements at the local level. And as you all know, we talked about this some before. We're under a current process to review our dispute resolution, working with an external professional who is contacting some of our stakeholders and contacting some of our parents to see how these processes work and serve them. So we're currently under that review process to make sure that these dispute resolution options are serving our families. To go a little bit deeper into formal complaints in our state, I added this indicator at request to talk through all of the parent formal complaints that we receive. And really to show you here our target. So if you look at the percent of total parent formal complaints resolved, we're required, it's 100%, and will always be 100%. We are required by law to resolve these within 60 days. Resolved here means the parent receives a formal written response by a legal team member as to the decision of that formal complaint. And so we must, as a state, resolve all formal complaints for our parents. And so let me talk to you a little bit more. You may be more interested in some of the specific numbers here. So in 2020, 2021, the department received 35 formal complaints. And just to talk through this, and this is all formal complaints that we receive with respect to our 90,000 students with disabilities in our state. So we've gone from 35, we had 35 formal complaints in 2020, 2021, and in 2021, 2022, so last year, we had 61 formal complaints. And we'll continue key investments, key supports for parents. We're continuing, you'll see on the agenda later, our Families Helping Families allocations to support our families. Other investments like our Exceptional Lives Partnership, which provides online resources and provides live chatting for parents to come on and ask any question they want to a SPED expert and to parents who are also in their shoes and have children with disabilities. And so those are partnerships that we will continue and we'll continue to support our parents in every way that we can in resolving disagreements and disputes that they have with their local school systems. And then lastly, I'll end, this has been of some interest as well, and I'll end with some additional compliance monitoring data. So we started this discussion back at October, Bessie, where we talked about compliance monitoring and how we rank and consider risk-based factors when determining school systems and the level of monitoring they receive each year. Our ranking system, if you'll remember, is a combination of some of our compliance and our results measures. Many of those that I listed on that slide when we started talking about key performance indicators, those are the same risk factors that we look at for school systems as well. And so you'll see here in 2020, 2021, 109 of our school systems were included in some level of monitoring. Nearly 23% were considered high risk and received an on-site monitoring. Nearly 12% were moderate high risk and received either desk audit or an on-site monitoring if there was some specific concern or something that we had heard multiple times. 65% were considered low risk and were required to self-monitor using our monitoring tools. And so last school year, we had 9 school systems who were in corrective action, and then we had 9 who were in what we call intensive corrective action. By and large, we get this question sometimes. Our school systems don't go longer than about 3 years without some level of monitoring, even if they're not considered at risk. And we've gotten some national praise for our monitoring system. Again, it's one of those that we also work with stakeholder groups for our monitoring. For our systems who receive on-site monitoring, there are also parent meetings that take place there. And so we are able to get parent input for those on-site monitorings and next steps for those school systems as well. And so it's a system that we are constantly looking at and looking for ways to improve and to better support our school systems. This is my last slide, and I'll end here saying IDA doesn't require perfection, but it does require us to find issues, notify those school systems, and get those issues of noncompliance corrected. And so we must do that, and that's what we do within the corrective action system. And we encourage our school systems to use that corrective. Most of them look at corrective action as feedback. We're giving you feedback, and here's next steps in order to improve that. And so if we truly have authentic compliance, where the I in IEP is truly individualized, where programs are providing that holistic support, I believe that we'll continue to improve the outcomes for our children with disabilities that we've talked about here today. And that concludes the information I wanted to share.
Great, fantastic report. We've got a number of hands up. Mr. Garvey?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to go to page 23 in our packet. Talks about the STED camera implementation update. And if you could check my math on this, it looks like we spent $787,000 on the cameras, and we installed 164, which comes to $4,800 per camera. Does that sound right?
Yes. However,
It seems high, and I was wondering if you could tell me why it seems high, why it might be high.
some of that could be just implementation as well, wiring, support, software for privacy protection. So any of those operations costs could also be added.
So it's not just the cost of the
just the
camera.
cost of the camera, right?
Mr. Garvey, I would add there too that as the system and school provide for the infrastructure, then the actual cost will go down per camera because definitely just adding a camera to the existing infrastructure and servers already in place. And I also want to add here, like the $8 million that we received as an allocation is state funds. So it's not federal funds. We received an $8 million allocation, pushed that out to schools. And this was a snapshot that we did in time. We created a portal in our EGMS system where at the conclusion of the year, because we felt like the conclusion of the year was the best time to capture it, because by that time systems would know how many they installed over the course of the year. They'll have to go in May and June and add that into their official. And so also in the, and I talked with members of Senate Finance on this, we also included in our request in the executive budget for a 10% annual allocation of $8 million for operating costs. Because one of the things that we've heard from system leaders is that, is this a one-time fund, and how do we continue to make sure we have funding for annual operation improvements and or repairs. And so we have an $800,000 request in, and it has been included in the executive budget. So I just want to make you aware of that.
Okay. 164 cameras also seems like a small number. I was expecting a much larger number. Are you expecting that to go up significantly?
I do, certainly. So most of our school systems were getting their policies in place. Remember the law, they had to have those in place December or January. And so then it's developing the process of how do parents request. That's the other thing that I would caution here. While we have several school systems that have said, hey, I have the funding, I'm putting them in all. I've got about 4 that are putting it in all self-contained classrooms. This is dependent upon parent requests per legislation. But I do think it's early implementation, and I do think that it will increase.
Okay. Could I move to another question? Or do you have to take some other best matters first?
No, you've got the floor, correct?
Okay. Moving to the stakeholder engagement. You said that there was only, like you said, 35 or 60 something stakeholder engagements instances of stakeholder engagements? Is that right? I think 35 was 1 year and 65 or 69 was another year.
That's our formal complaints. That's the number of formal complaints that we've received from parents.
It seems awfully low out of 90,000 students. Is there a lack of awareness of parents about the formal complaint process?
So
Or
we're working.
families helping families must know about the formal complaint.
Absolutely.
And
I was
they
gonna-
interact with these parents all
Yeah.
the time.
We've done a number of capacity building sessions with our Families Health and Family Center directors. They certainly know, they provide a lot of training on this for families. We look to publish some modules, parent-friendly language about these options. I'll also say that we have other options, and so again, formal complaints are just a small portion of this. We have other options available to families. So IEP facilitation requests, those are, we have many, many more of those for families. So I
And
think,
that's a process where that room department people get involved with the
yes,
local LEA
yes,
to
it's,
help parents resolve what seems like a low number. What could you say was the top 1 or 2 issues involved in the 35 or 69 formal complaints?
so I don't have in front of me, but as far as a breakdown of what all are the complaints, but they're very specific. So these complaints can only be related to issues with a school system providing FAPE. So it could be not following an IP, it could be a parent who disagrees with the evaluation results. It could be they disagree with the related services placed in the IEP. So all of those decisions that are made regarding providing those services could be the meat of these complaints.
And you would say that those are the most, I hate to say popular, most common issues that are involved in these 35 or 69 instances?
Without having a breakdown of exactly, but yes,
Just all the
it's
time.
going to be about the faith. It's going to be about, I disagree with what the system has put in this IEP or the decision. The school system said my child's not eligible. I disagree with that. I think they have a disability. We want to work through the about.
And what about the corrective action plans and intensive corrective action plans? What are those typically for? A lack of doing what?
So corrective action typically could be where we find a lack of documentation that supports what's in the IEP. It could be that the school system has some lapsed timelines. They haven't done IEPs or evaluations within the specific timelines. Sometimes there are reasons for that, but we have to know the explanation. So by and large for corrective action, or I'm not following the IEP, so we have an IEP in place, but we're looking for the documentation for the service logs and how those services are being provided, and it's not matching.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Dr. Goffey?
What comes first, the formal complaint or the settlement agreement?
Glad you asked that. There's no entry point. So a parent can request to enter at any tier from the ones that we consider the least adversarial, the IEP facilitation, or a mediation, all the way to, they can start straight with due process if they would like.
And when you say due process, you're talking about the settlement agreement, is that right?
Yes, and
Okay.
going to that court-like proceeding.
Okay, and that to me seems more severe, like it
Yes.
seems the most severe of all of these. Okay, so what, do we have guidance for families of what a good entry point would be, right? Because I feel like when I think about parenting a child and I think about educating children, you don't want to be in the place that's you don't want to start in the place that's most severe, in my personal opinion, professional opinion. So do we provide guidance and support and helping people understand entry points that can resolve conflicts?
So that would really come from their families, type of families, partnerships. They really will help them fill out the paperwork, whatever it is. When we speak and share with parents, what we tell them is, these are your options. You can enter at whatever point you would like, but have you done this? Have you considered? Does your SPED director know? Sometimes I find there are things going on at the school and the system level may not even know. And it's a very easy fix and collaboration that can happen. And so that's how we would respond to that is you can enter at any point. However, have you thought about this? But always keeping in mind, they can enter at whatever point they would like to. We can't persuade them.
So for a lot of people, we're the face of the state. And so what would you, like, this is your chance to coach us on what you would want us to do to support families to get to a positive place for kids.
Certainly, I believe in working with the local school system, using the least adversarial options. Personal opinion, the IEP facilitation, if there's trouble communicating with the school system or there's just disagreement, I love to point parents to IEP facilitation. It's a place where we can come together and really figure out and keep it focused on the student. What's the best thing for this child and make sure we get the best pieces in place. The other one that I would encourage you to look at is mediation, which is, I think, less, it's not as overwhelming for a parent. Sitting in a court-like proceeding is intimidating and it's not as parent-friendly. But mediation, they will get, they can have, you have the system level who gets support from, and that's a legal support person. So you get some of that legal support with mediation, and the parent will get some of that support. And there's some time where there's some counseling individually and can truly help. And so those are the ones, Dr. Coffey, that I would really point parents to, because due process is very, it's very intimidating.
And then I also heard you talk about the special ed director of the school system being a point person that we can help connect our constituents with.
Yes.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Great, thank you, Dr. Davis.
I just want to say that all those check marks on slide 13 are a really big deal. And one of the things that I've learned through my time on the Special Education Advisory Panel is that Louisiana typically ranks fairly low in national rankings, and that's in part because of the rigor of our performance indicators. There are lots of states that really lowball expectations. And that makes them appear as if they're doing a really good job, and that historically has not been the case in Louisiana. And as a result, I don't think I've ever seen us meeting targets like this. So congratulations to all the people in special education across our state who are doing the really, really hard work in the classroom. And thank you to your office for doing that hard work. I do have one question. I'm relieved to hear that, every 3 years, districts are receiving some kind of monitoring by the state, because typically, as I've heard stakeholder concerns that, over the past 15 years, especially when we were in such a budget crisis, that our inspection staff dramatically declined in that time period. And so I just wanted to know, do we have a sense of where we are in terms of the ability to hire additional people to help you when it comes to monitoring and enforcement? Do we know where we are?
We currently have 5 individuals who are on that monitoring team. We have, I know Dr. Bromley is requesting additional funding to add 3 to 4 additional individuals who can go out and provide monitoring. And so that's certainly something that is on our radar and on on the agenda for House appropriations as well, so.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from the desk members? Ms. Morris?
Yes, I'd just like to, join my colleagues, thank you for the work here. I know I get a lot of engagement with stakeholders with concerns in this space, so I really appreciate the responsiveness from the department, particularly with the KPI development, so that we know we've got specific metrics in place, and you guys are coming back to us on a regular basis to give us updates, so we know if we're heading in the right direction, if we're meeting our targets or not. I get several questions about, I'm starting on slide 4, page 20 of my handout. I get a lot of questions about the distribution of the IDEA funding. My understanding as a novice in this field is that these are supposed to be dedicated funds spent only for children with disabilities. Is that the right interpretation? And is that the way Louisiana is allocated the funds?
There is one opportunity, Mr. Morris, within their IDA flow-through funds. There is an opportunity for school systems to reserve up to 15% of their funds, their IDA funds, to support what's called coordinated early intervening services. That is the only subset of their IDA funds that can go to benefiting students without disabilities and students with disabilities who, but really primarily students without disabilities who you've identified using your data who are at risk or performing below level. It could be behavior that you're seeing as a need in a specific school, a specific grade level. And so there is that small portion of funds that can be used for students without disabilities, and school systems have to kind of submit to us, what is their plan? What are you using those early intervention funds for? So that's the only area that I would say can be used for your general ed students.
And you're telling me that's something that you guys monitor for compliance?
Yes.
Okay, can you, on the same page, can you help me understand the funds that are identified here in 611 and 619? It's not really clear which of these are allocated for State Department of Education and which flows right to the district.
On this slide, the
4.
Oh, okay. So on slide 4, the top row is the row for state set aside that comes to the state. That middle row, the flow through funds, those are the funds that are going straight out to school systems. And then the ARP funds also went out to school systems.
Okay, and so the 22 million that is allocated for the state, those are dedicated as well just for children with disabilities to address their needs. Okay. Specifically, just want to give you guys kudos again for recognizing the concern about the significant amount of funds that aren't used in the current year that are carried over to the second year. So on row 1 on slide 5, we're showing $69 million as I interpret it, that was actually carried over. And so you guys recognize that, and you put in an accountability plan here, so that you're going to go back to the districts and follow up on that. So can you talk me through how that's going to work so that my stakeholders understand?
And I'll tell you here on this slide, when we look at these flow through balances for 21-22, right? That's really the year where they're in their carryover period, right? That $18 million balance for 611, which I suspect is less now, when I analyzed that fund stream report, that's spread across about 17 school systems, where you can see they've got I looked at who had more than half of their funds still remaining. That's really set to end September 30th.
Wait, so I'm sorry, Steve. Can we back up to the total, the 69 million?
Yes,
Okay, so as I understood it, this day was reflected on March 1st.
right.
Okay, so the 69 million, what is that reflect?
That reflects the carryover that's available this year, so
So it
22,
was-
23.
So it wasn't spent in the budget year, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to understand is going forward, right?
What do
How
you
you, how you guys are gonna hold districts accountable so that those funds, that $69 million is used in the current year to meet student needs? Can you just kind of talk me through that just so my stakeholders understand what they should expect going forward?
Absolutely. We've already communicated to school systems now. So currently, school systems, we have some school systems that draw these funds down and do a request once, maybe twice a year. And really, this is collaboration, right? Because this isn't the SPED staff requesting reimbursement. So it's working with program staff, working with finance staff to make sure the reimbursements are being pulled down and submitted. So currently that's happening, you know, across LEAs. They could be submitting it once a year, twice a year. Some do it monthly, some do it quarterly. What we have submitted communication to them is that they will now be required to do it at least quarterly. Otherwise, we will begin to send out weekly email notifications, reminding them, hey, we need your reimbursement request submitted for this quarter. If you haven't drawn anything down, this is a reminder. And then, so we're giving them some time to get used to that switch for those who maybe are only requesting reimbursement once a year right now, to get them on that quarterly cycle. And then starting January 2024, we have also communicated to them that we may add conditions to their grant award notifications. And so when we get their next funding cycle open, we can put some statements in there and some requirements, some additional requirements on them as a school system due to not timely requesting their reimbursement.
Okay, so you do have some non-compliance measures in place with specific conditions that will incentivize them to be more expedient about spending these funds available. And also I want to know there's a difference between if they're actually spending the money to meet the student needs versus there's a problem with the accounting department and they're seeking reimbursement. So what's actually reflected here, as I understand it, is the reimbursement, it's not the actual spend. Is that right?
Correct. All of these funds for 21, 22, and 22, 23, they're fully budgeted, they're fully obligated. They're just in those processes of drawing them down as reimbursements.
Okay, on slide 7, January 2023, received stakeholder feedback. Can you help me out with that? What stakeholders provided feedback?
Absolutely. So our federal programs team, and that was also the month that we met with all federal programs directors in the state and launched this, how we were going to move forward with this. But that team also convenes a group of stakeholders that include our grants management staff, federal programs, because like I said, this is really about, spending your funds, from a program office level, you are putting those initiatives, those priorities, you're serving on that school system planning team and budgeting team, but you've also now got to work together with your federal programs team and your finance team to actually do what we're asking them to do. And so that particular stakeholder group included all of those people, SPED directors, federal programs team, finance, and so we brought this issue to me.
Parents in there.
So I am not sure, I don't believe there was a parent role on that group.
Is that something we could consider going forward?
We can certainly.
Making sure we get parent feedback? Okay. Okay, and next one, March 31, same slide. You had mentioned that you had provided the link before so that parents could access the information real time. Can you give me that again? Do you have that handy?
I don't, but I'm happy.
Well, point out right
here in terms of the parent opportunities that we also have SEEP, which is what Dr. Davis sits on, which is an open public meeting for all parents to participate should they want to. This is really about the accounting process in many ways. And so we're absolutely more than welcome to always add additional parents. We just want to add that this is around accounting mechanisms and working with school financial offices to report. And some systems have a practice of just reporting at the end of the year. So that doesn't mean that they haven't been spending, but I think the steps that we're putting in place are going to prompt and encourage that reporting in a more frequent basis.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so, Mary, if you don't mind, could you send me that email?
The link again.
Yeah,
Sure.
the link, you need to send me an email so I can share it with others.
Sure.
I appreciate your indulgence here. I get a lot of emails. On slide 14, the last row, the term competitively employed, how do you define that?
So for that one, we align with, and that's defined for us federally, we align with the Rehabilitation Act. So competitively employed here in the Rehabilitation Act is also called competitive integrated employment. And so that includes full and part-time employment. I believe the minimum is 20 hours a week. These students with disabilities have to be paid at the minimum wage, so there has to be a comparable experience to their non-disabled work peers.
Okay. And, you know, so I think we're all interested in the entire student population, of high school graduates, and, you know, what those outcomes look like. So I'm curious about tracking. And how do you track, you know, what a student does after high school with regard to employment?
So this particular indicator is tracked through a follow-up survey. So special education staff are required annually to reach out to some of them, and they do it in a multitude of ways so that they can capture this data because they have to report it to us. And it involves special education staff annually reaching out to those students who exited in the prior year to find out where are they, what are they doing, what was their day after high school experience. Are you enrolled in higher ed? Are you employed? Are you in a different program? And so for this particular indicator, it is literally an outreach because it is hard to track.
Right. Okay, last two questions. Thank you. So we're all aware of the teacher shortage, and you know what I hear mostly is math, science, and special ed. Where do you see the biggest impact with regard to student outcomes due to the lack of special education education?
A lot of the feedback and input that we hear from the field as well is around behavior specialists and supporting challenging behaviors because we want those students in that inclusive environment. And it takes some serious training and knowledge to know and understand how to respond and keep those students in the most inclusive environment, which is what we want. And so we hear a lot around support and more support from us needed around behavior management for students. I also see the biggest impact here. You know, we have a lot of our higher ed institutions which are doing a better job of putting out educators who are dually certified and encouraging them to also get that special education add-on while they're there. The one that we see a huge need, and we hear it a lot on SEEP as well, is additional educators in the area of students with significant cognitive disabilities. It is a special person, educator, mindset, heart to support those students, and so we hear that a lot. And for a lot of our higher ed institutions, we know it's very hard for them to make a class size sometimes to keep those programs. So you may go a semester where I don't have enough pre-educators interested in those classes, and so they can't make the class. So that's another one that's really tough for us as a state, educators in that significant and severe, students with significant challenges.
Got it, thank you. Last one. You and I talked about this before. I appreciate the metrics you guys put together. And the same thing here about least restricted environment. And understand that's a key indicator, so something like that. Can you go down now?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that one in October, so I didn't want to bring it back this time. But I believe in October, we looked at about 68 to 70% of our kids are in a regular education classroom for the vast majority of the day, which is great. I consider us an inclusive state in that regard, and so we do have the vast majority of our kids with disabilities getting their high-quality teaching and learning inside a regular education classroom, which is what we want to the max extent possible. But just realize we have to have that continuum because we know some students need the more restrictive setting. And so we have to keep that continuum open, but always interested in increasing that target and increasing the more inclusive setting.
When do you think is the next appropriate time to update the board on this particular topic? What do you think is the appropriate frequency?
I'm happy whenever you ask, but I would
You're
say
the expert,
an
so I'm
annual, I would say an annual cycle of this type of data feels right.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Wilkie?
I just want to thank Mr. Morris for bringing up the question about the post-secondary opportunities that our students explore and there's that success with the post-secondary opportunities. And I just have a question for you, Dr. Brumley, about what is the status of us as a state being able to truly know and understand those things after our students leave K-12? What kind of relationships do we have with the Board of Regents or even with workforce that might help us?
So we meet regularly with both Board of Regents, but also some of the other systems in terms of higher ed to better understand this. There were some complexities around data share that, many of us and higher ed, business community and advocacy community have tried to work through over the last few years. And so I know that there's been progress made, but certainly there's still work to do.
What do you think is the next milestone that we should be working to achieve in this area?
In terms of
Getting a better idea of where our students are after they leave our K-12 system, and because I think if we were able to then report that back to systems, then they would be better able to provide the support that students need while they're in high school to help them.
Yeah, I think much like the attendance conversation we've been having, it's really about having clean data and making sure those data sharing agreements are in place and are effective between multiple different agencies and institutions. And so we just have to continue to push right there, I think we're right now. Because unless we have good clean data, we're unable to make other decisions. But a lot of progress has been made there.
And I would just say to that point, the hard sticking point, right, is the workforce data. I mean, that data exists. They have an expansive data set. The problem is gaining access to it and linking it through social security numbers. It can be done because I've done it with TANF evaluations and things like that, but it does require kind of extensive collaboration and then quite possibly even some legislative changes surrounding student privacy and our ability to use identifiers, right, in secure environments to link those systems.
And there, legally there's information around student numbers that we can't have as an agency, that we just legally cannot have because of privacy concerns that were implemented, a decade ago. So a lot of work is happening on that front, but still there's work that has to be done.
Great, thank you, board members. Any other questions or comments from the board? We have a motion to receive any, sorry, Chair Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say thank you. I found this presentation to be just incredibly informative and thoughtful, and there have been many comments that my fellow colleagues have made that I agree with, namely just what we should be celebrating. I think I believe someone made the point earlier that we, the check marks, I think Belinda, you said that was a great point. I just want to also add, there's been an orientation during this presentation to continuous improvement. And I want to name that as just very brave and important. That's what we ask of our educators, that's what we ask of our schools. And so even the areas where we still have areas to grow, I've appreciated how you've approached just the framing of that and the fact that we are all continuously improving to get better at the areas we need to. So thank you very much for your leadership.
Right. Thanks again, great presentation. No objections to the motion to receive, the motion passes. I'd like to extend the point of personal privilege to Ms. Howard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chairman Castillo. Yes, we are so privileged today to have educators in our midst. And we are joined by 35 participants in Stand for Children Louisiana's 2022-23 LEAD Fellowship. These exceptional educators and administrators from across our state are leaders in their fields. They have been studying education policy, and what a great place to be today, and effective advocacy for the past 6 months, and are celebrating the culmination of their fellowship in Baton Rouge, of their this week in participating in the legislative process, and of course here at Bessie. We welcome LEAD Fellows. Would you please stand, 35 educators, from teachers, administrators. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard, and congratulations to all of you. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 28, item 5.1, consideration of renewal of state certified world languages immersion schools. The recommendation is to approve as outlined.
Thank you, Madam. Motion to approve. Mr. Rock, seconded by Mr. Mallory.
Still, we would like to allow Ms. Sherry Case to make a presentation here briefly.
Thank you so much. And good morning. I'm Sherry Cates, Academic Content. Today we would like to take this opportunity to recognize and celebrate 10 schools across 3 different parishes in our state on earning the distinguished honor of becoming a Louisiana State Certified World Language Immersion Site. The application process to become a Louisiana State Certified World Language Immersion Site is one that is rigorous and requires a true commitment to ensuring students have the necessary support and exposure to attain proficiency in world languages. This allows them to succeed in our local community. The state certification of world languages immersion site application process consists of 3 different components: questionnaires, Louisiana Certified World Language Immersion Site visit rubric, and site visit audits. Once again, congratulations to these 10 schools on the tremendous achievement. As I call your school and system name, please come up to receive your certificate of recognition and take a photo with your Bessie representative. We're going to call them by parishes, and we do Calcasieu first. So, get ready. Frash Elementary School, Calcasieu Parish. Here for a second. Next up, Calcasieu Parish, Henry Heights Elementary School. Oak Park Middle School, sorry. Grand Lake Elementary School. J. Welsh Middle School.
Thank you so much.
And last one for Calcasieu Parish, W.W. Lewis Middle School. Moving on to Lafayette Parish, Evangeline Elementary School. Myrtle Place Elementary School. Paul Grove Middle School. And moving on to St. Martin Parish, Tesh Elementary School. Thank you so much. We really can't underscore enough the tremendous effort and hard work and rigorous process this takes to make sure students acquire our languages.
Thanks, Chair, I appreciate that. Also, we'd just like to share some of the requirements that these schools have to meet that are non-negotiable in order to be recognized. They have to adhere to state guidelines governing minimum daily instructional time in immersion. They have to make sure that's high-quality time. They have to have evidence of immersion language teaching throughout all of the content areas. They have to have teachers who possess native-like fluency in the immersion language. They have to have articulated professional development. They have to have a provision for student remediation as needed. They have to have visibility and recognition of the language throughout the school, and they have to have written policies regarding entry into and exit from the immersion setting. So those are some of the non-negotiable things we have to accomplish. And I also want to recognize, I know that we have Al Blanchard, who is superintendent in St. Martin, so I want to say thank you to him for being here, as well as Herman Trostberg from Lafayette, who is here and also doing great work in many different areas. So I just want to recognize him, and I believe we have some public comments.
Yes, we do. We have a number of public comment cards. Ms. Ginger Richard with the Lafayette Parish School System supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Felice Williams likewise supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Catherine Risselt supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Catherine Rayburn likewise supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Ms. Lori Warner supports the recommendation, wishes to speak. Mr. Warner, if you'd make your way down, and the next we'll have Monique Roberts and Caitlin DeVille, if you would likewise make your way up as well. And if you state your name and go right ahead.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Buenos dias. Bonjour. Ni hao. My name is Laura Warner, and I am the Runaway Curriculum Coordinator for Lafayette Parish School System. And on behalf of our district and our 3 schools receiving the certification today, I would like to thank you for your support of immersion education. We are proud of our teachers, leaders, and above all, we are proud of our immersion students who choose this unique and enriching pathway to become bilingual. Please continue to support and grow our immersion programs statewide with funding so that they can not only make an impact on our educational system, on our culture, but also our economy and our workforce. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Monique Roberts, the World Language and English Learner Consultant for Calcasieu Parish. I'm very thankful to work for a school district that values and supports bilingual education. Calcasieu Parish is proud to have the longest running immersion program in Louisiana, 38 years old and going strong. We continue to expand these wonderful language opportunities for our students as we recently started a 2A immersion program that will apply for state certification next year. Research shows that proficient bilinguals are better at problem solving, task switching, creativity, conflict management, and have more mental flexibility and are detail oriented. These are skills that year after year propel our students into academic success and prepare them for the global workforce. Thanks to the Louisiana Department of Education and the World Language Leadership of Michelle Crow and Melissa Monroe, the state now has detailed criteria outlining high-quality, highly effective immersion programs. I'm very proud that Calcasieu Parish has 6 schools that are providing such a world-class education for our students, and we thank you for your support.
Thank you. And Caitlin DeVille.
Caitlin wanted to address item 8.1.
Right, great, thank you. All right, any other public comments? Seeing none, no other questions or comments from the board. There was a motion to approve, no objection, motion passes. Next item, please.
Your next item is on page 30, item 5.2, consideration of the annual report of alternative education programs and alternative education schools in Louisiana. The recommendation is to approve the alternative education programs and schools for the 2023-2024 school year as outlined.
Great, can I get a motion to approve? Mr. Miller and seconded by Mr. Corby. Thank you. No report. Any questions, comments, objections? Motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 41, item 6.1, consideration of an update report regarding the early learning and development standards review committee. The recommendation is to receive.
Can I get a motion to receive? Mr. Mellorin, seconded by Mr. Rock. All right, the report.
Yes, sir, thank you. Since Bessie's last meeting, the Early Development Standards Review Committee did meet, and at the request of Bessie, I believe Dr. Louisiana will come up and make a few comments, and Dr. Sonia chairs that particular committee. Sonia, you may want to tell us about May 1st.
Libby Swami, Executive Director of the Louisiana Policy Institute for Children, as well as the Chair for the Early Learning and Development Standards. We met since the last Bessie meeting on March 15th and have been working asynchronously since then on the guidance documents related to social and emotional development, along with continuing to make revisions to the standards in the areas of social emotional development and early language and literacy. And the work asynchronously, again, working on language, continuing to work on the definition of social emotional development with the guidance documents. In the guidance documents, we're working through the examples that were proposed by the public, which many of them were right in line with child development, and making sure that we're including those public comments that have been made through the public portal that was reopened in December, and the public comments that have been made since we've been meeting with the committee. The committee will meet again on May 11th in the hopes that we will have quorum and be able to share with Bessie the guidance document and any revisions to the standards.
Great. Any questions, comments from the board? Thank you, Dr. Sonia, for your report. There's a motion to receive. I don't see any. Okay, Mr. Morris.
So we would expect to hear again back from you in June, I guess, following that May meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so our next update will be June.
Yes, sir. You should, at that update, you should have the revision to the standards as well as the guidance document just for social emotional development. To Dr. Bromley's point, I would also like to mention on May 1st is early ed day at the Capitol. where Dr. Bowman will speak, as well as the governor, parents and providers about the importance of investing in early career education in our state.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sonia. Right, there being no objections or additional comments from the board, the motion to receive has been approved. Example, please.
Your next item is on page 54, item 7.1, consideration of revisions to Bulletin 741, Louisiana Handbook for School Administrators regarding student attendance. The recommendation is to approve as notice of intent.
Can I get a motion to approve? Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Rock. Thank you. Let's see, we have a public comment card until Dr. Rowan. We have one comment from Mr. Michael Falk, who opposes the recommendation and wishes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the board, Michael Falk, Associate Executive Director of the Louisiana Association of School Superintendents. And once again, we have to speak against the proposed policy changes. At the last meeting, we stated some of our concerns. Since that time, there has not been any more inclusion of stakeholders in the work of the task force. Any changes and implementation of policy, we still advocate that the student information systems need to be properly aligned. Currently, there are still issues with the information system and the information system being provided by local school districts. We continue to ask for work on clarifying missed assignments and tests when completed satisfactorily. And I think a key part of this is going to require some changes in the law. And that's going to require that we work with district attorneys, with the court system, to hold parents accountable for their child attending school. There is a mandatory attendance law in Louisiana. It is not being followed through on. If we're going to make a shift, if we're going to change it, we're going to address those issues, this has to be a part of the conversation before we adopt any policy. That's the position of our association, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. Comments, board, questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Falk. Dr. Diggs?
Can I just ask a question around, I guess, the clarity of changes surrounding the striking of excused and exempted from the current policy? And correct me if I'm not understanding it correctly, but so if it has the word in the current language, if it says excused, that's an absence which allows for makeup work. And then if it is also exempted, that means it does not count against the lost instructional minutes that a student has to have each year in order to be promoted. Is that correct? Is my understanding of that correct?
Dr. Davis, I'm going to ask for Ms. Hunt to come up around this particular question with Ms. Townsend. They've worked on this policy over there.
Should I repeat my question? Please. So in the current language, if it says excused, that means it's an absence which allows the student to do makeup work. And then if it's exempted, that means that it does not count against like lost instructional minutes that are required for each student, to have so many in order to be promoted. Is that correct? Is my understanding correct? So if it's an excused and exempted missed day, is that correct, right? So the student gets to make up the work and it is not counting against their 10 days that they have to miss and pass. Does that make sense?
Yes. What we're trying to do was to align best policy with the law that doesn't have those extra steps. And also that part about.
Turn your mic
Oh,
on.
sorry.
Thank you.
The part about not being able to get a grade unless a student was in attendance a certain amount of time, that is purely a Bessie construct. That is not in the law. I don't believe we changed that part. I mean, it's still there if that's still what y'all want the policy to be, but that's not in the law. That's just simply Bessie policy.
It's still located in a different section. So this really separates the daily attendance from the required minutes in attendance to receive a grade. So if a school district still wants to withhold a grade at the end of a semester because of student attendance, they still can do that, and it outlines that later on in the section. This is just allowing us to laser focus on the issue of truancy by separating out the daily attendance required in law from the required minutes in attendance in a class to receive a grade at the end of the semester.
Do we worry that any of this might be confusing to parents who are trying to figure out how to navigate those things? And since we're changing the language and separating it from the way we're mandating instructional minutes, which are the things that are going to keep the child from being able to progress to the next grade, was there a discussion by the group around that and the possibility that it might be confusing to parents?
The group felt pretty strongly that this clarifies it. Our parent representatives, Louisiana PTA, we had multiple child welfare and attendance officers in the group. Mr. Patrick Jenkins, the superintendent, was part of the group. We had feedback from all of these people who were part of the task force, as well as part of the engagement between the task force meeting and bringing this to Bessie. And they really felt like this clarifies it for parents and for school level personnel.
And I was a little disappointed that that this group did not meet between the deferral of this item at our last Bessie meeting and this meeting. And we deferred the item and there were literally no changes. And so I just would like to say that it's troublesome.
The group did feel strongly that we needed to have a clean data set to begin to analyze the larger systemic issues that are contributing to our truancy numbers. And part of that was clarifying the definitions, allowing for data collection from systems, so that when the group comes back together, we have a solid understanding of how the Louisiana attendance system works, where the numbers are coming in, and where there could be bottlenecks or holdups as they move from one stage in the process to the next. It really was a barrier to fully understanding why the numbers are the way they are when we didn't have a clear data set. And then when there is so much confusion, as Dr. Rumley's mentioned before, among the different players or pieces of that system. So we really feel that getting this data over the next bit, as well as the continued work with systems around what they're doing to address student attendance, will allow us to address the problem.
Ms. Holloway?
Thank you. I have a few questions and statements. I know last meeting we had Tangi present, and their presentation was on EdGear and how they, okay, so I was familiar with that because we've been using EdGear for many years. I was part of the first initial concept with them. So it's just kind of trying to put those pieces together. Why are we having this presentation? And then I hear that EdGear and, I'm sorry, EdGear, not that, but EdGear and EdLink, there's issues with the linking. There's still some issues within the department about the linking of these systems for the appropriate data to come forward. Am I stating this right, Dr. Brown?
What we have is, and actually the state of Indiana has a model much like, I guess, what we're trying to get to. So they have multiple different student information systems in their LEAs across the state that has to report into one system. And so in our state, we have two that are the most prominent student information systems, but then we have others. And so that's the point of the 3-year rollout, so that there's not an expectation that next year all this has to happen, but we have a 3-year runway in order to make sure that all the systems are talking to each other appropriately, and it gives systems the time to make sure that they understand what's being asked of them and have the resources and support to help them get there.
Are we trying to implement what the other state has? Or that you just mentioned?
No, I'm saying that the state of Indiana has a system much like ours where they have the SEA has one SES that all the
the locals report up to through their SIS.
And I think that's what the concerns are within the state districts, is that we're trying to change policy before we have a system that works. And so that's one, like a
And I
negative.
think that our system works. It's just a matter
But
of.
it's not linking. If the information is not being provided properly to the districts.
Yeah, I don't know what information we would provide.
Mike, can you help us with that? If you don't mind.
The issues we've been experiencing in schools is that they upload the information and they show they have no errors. Then the next day they get a report, they have 22, 23, 50 errors and stuff like that. And there's no way they don't understand why it's showing one day that they have no errors and then the next day. And that's the reason that the Superintendent's Advisory Council, Superintendent Claxton, requested that we have a superintendent to serve on the task force to help work through these problems and stuff. And then at your last meeting, the board had agreed to that, but there hasn't been any involvement yet in that. But systems, the majority of school systems in the state use one student information system. The majority of the school systems use J-Campus Educator. That system has some features in it that you can use that's already in existence to help you monitor and track attendance and targets and everything like that. But when we're loading up the information that we have in this system to the EdLink, it's showing errors. So we do not feel comfortable until this is resolved that we can implement, because we have to change policy, we can implement a policy until this is addressed.
Good point. So that's one issue. The other issue is the policy change that people need to come to the table and speak about. And from what I'm understanding, the Louisiana Child Welfare and Attendance met with you, Joan, and they had a conversation. However, they felt like they weren't heard, and the policy is continuing. And then there's the Superintendent's Association, there's the School Board Association that still have concerns, and they're on the ground. And so because of all these concerns and conversations we're having, I'm going to ask that this be deferred again, and that people come to the table and talk this through. This is very important. We don't want our percentage of truancy to rise, and if this is a policy that may cause this or things that are not working right, we need to have this in order.
Just to point out, in terms of the superintendent representation, the president of the Superintendent's Association was on the task force. The president of the Superintendent's Association. But we have also taken the time, and Mr. Falk's request to add, and Mr. Claxton to add another member. So whenever the STAR task force meets again, we'll add another member of the superintendent's group. And with the child welfare and attendance officers, I believe there were 3 child welfare and attendance officers from LEAs across the state. So we did have representation. So I don't want there to be a belief that there wasn't representation. I'm not speaking to your request to defer. I'm not speaking to that. I'm just talking about the fact that representation was there.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't know what the confusion is.
So you asked for it, you didn't make a motion, so we'll continue the
Let's go,
discussion.
yeah, please.
And then you may want to make a motion. All right, Mr. Marks?
Mr. Falk, or Mr. Superintendent, whoever the appropriate person who does answer my question. So there's a 3-year timeline that goes here to implement the communication link. Given the description that you provided us, there's obviously a problem with communication link for the districts to provide this information. What's a reasonable amount of time to work through this hurdle to establish this communication link?
You adopt.
Is 3 years not a reasonable amount of time?
The thing is, once policy becomes policy, you know, then you have to go through and you have to change your policies and stuff like that at the local district. And I think the issue is we're not comfortable that it's been fully vetted to establish a policy, okay? When you look at the question Ms. Davis has about does it impact the instructional minutes requirements and things like this, you have pupil progression policies that are going to be implemented or impacted. And we just think that because there has not been enough of the detailed digging down that this went through it quickly, that there just needs more time to be vetted. That's how I feel.
So that speaks beyond the communications link, that speaks to other language in the proposal, correct?
Yes. And no language was changed from the March meeting to this meeting.
I thought I heard Ms. Townsend say that Mr. Jenkins was included in the conversations from the last meeting to this meeting.
Prior to the March meeting, we met with Mr. Jenkins for about an hour and talked through it all with him. He actually liked the idea. He thought it would help us with things.
Was it just him with you?
This was a separate call that I had with him to go over it and talk through it just for him to be able to bring up any concerns and talk in detail with everything.
The only concern I have is, I say the only concern, the major concern I have is that I don't know what the incentive is going to be to establish the communications link and the policies put in place. And, you know, the data that I look at, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that the current truancy rate in the state is 46%. The EDR district attorney's office met with them a couple of times, and data they shared with me was that in 2019, there were 97 homicides in EDR. And greater than 90% of the victims and the assailants didn't finish ninth grade. So we can address our truancy problem, and I'm saying it's not flip and switch, but I think it's reasonable that we should be able to report that data real time. And I think 3 years is a reasonable timeline to be able to do that. And for me, there's a huge sense of urgency here. You know, if our kids aren't in school, where are they? They're not in a good place. So I think it's incumbent on this board to address that concern, to work with school systems, right, to address the concern. But I think 3 years is a reasonable amount of time to establish the communications link so we can get that data available accurately and reported real time so we can address those concerns real time. And again, just personally can't stress enough the urgency. I think that we need to respond here and begin working with school systems to do that.
And I want you to understand, Mr. Morris and the board, that superintendents realize that this is an issue. They deal with it every day. They're still trying to recover from a lot of things, the hurricanes, the pandemic, all that. They're still trying to find some of their students, and they don't know where they're at. And so all of the implications of these things, it is a concern to them. But we feel that there's enough time that it can be implemented, not now, but I would say within a school year, another school year. I'm just saying.
So in 2019, there were 97 homicides, so we're going to wait another year, maybe another 97, and then another year. I just don't think that's the right answer. And I think 3 years is a significant runway to make the communications link. And I'm not speaking to the other language, in the proposal. My concern is just with the communications link. So if there's some way we could separate those two, Ms. Holloway, I don't know if your concerns can be addressed that way. But I think the communication link is really important, so we can start working in that direction.
Okay, Ms. Borchett.
I think everybody's got the same goals here. I mean, I think we all want to get to a place where data is available on a timely basis. I think last time, Ms. Holloway asked for the deferral just so that the people could get together and everybody get on the same page. And I think everybody is trying to do it, but maybe we just haven't quite accomplished that. I don't think it would be unreasonable to ask the department, the superintendent's group, and then the child welfare and attendance group to just get together and come to some common agreement that we can approve in June. I'm looking at some of the definitions. I know that, Ms. Townsend, definition of truancy, how many unexcused absences, or how many absences?
5 unexcused absences or 5 unexcused tardies within 1 semester.
Right. In today's world, that we have high truancy rates because kids are absent more than 5 times in a semester. And I know that's something we're continually working on. We have policies with the DAs, offices in different, in all of our different municipalities. We have truancy officers out there. 5, a lot of kids, it's unexcused absences and tardies, right? If you tardy 5 times, you meet the definition of truancy. Your parent drops you off, you walk in 5 minutes late, 5 times in the semester, you meet the definition of truancy. We have to differentiate between what I would consider a real truant and other kids. Because if I've got a parent, if I have a kid who's dropped off late 5 times, I'm not sending truancy officers or going to the DA's office or putting programs in place. I'm working through it in a different way. So when that statistic goes in there, and we're looking at 40-something%, we do have a high rate of truancy. I'm not sure it's quite that high because that definition is very, very restrictive. I would like to, if we can get to the point with a reporting system that we can differentiate this kind of stuff. And right now, you know, I'm looking even we took out all the exempted absences. So they got eliminated in this particular policy. So an excused absences which are not, an excused absence is now an absence which is not considered for purposes of truancy, including these ones mentioned above, which were formerly exempted. Well, we excuse other types of absences as well. So I'm assuming that's still going to be left to the particular districts and the particular schools. For example, if kids are going on a religious retreat, we excuse those. That's not one of the ones listed under the formerly exempted now excused absences. So a system of reporting it is not as simple as it seems. And when we look at this 3-year process, I'm hoping that we can do something better in 3 years. But we can't, it's hard to turn these things on a dime to say, okay, today I'm going to change my reporting system to include this and this. Well, then now I'm going to have to refine it to this and refine it to that. All I'm asking maybe at this point, if we could do what Ms. Holloway is asking, but ask Ms. Townsend and Ms. Hunt, the superintendent's group and the child welfare attendants, can we just come together? I think we can make this, we can get a policy together by June that all 3 groups can work with, and to give it one more shot so that we can have everyone on board with the recognition that this truancy issue is not a simple definition. I mean, it's maybe a simple definition, but intention is not that simple. And
Ms. Arjant, our conversations with the DA's office were a lot different than religious retreats, so I just said that.
oh, I know that. But that puts the child in that 40-something% of truancy. It's that religious retreat or that travel ball team that's going up to God knows where to play some national championship that's not affiliated with the school, but you're going to excuse the absence, you're not going to reporting for a truancy. We have very real problems that you're talking about, and that's true in all districts where we've got kids walking the streets and should be in school, and we have to go after them. I just want to go after the real problems to deal with and not the small not these small things that I don't think are a real problem. And if we're gonna have statistics, I'd like it to really reflect that. I wanna know who are the real problems and where do we have them, and what are the commonalities and how we're gonna address it. Not just one big pot for kids that I don't think is realistic of the true spirit of the term.
Sorry.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Chelsea.
I just want to say that I think Ms. O'Shea's points are very well taken. I appreciate that. I just have a question, Ms. Townsend, about the task force's specific voting. Did they vote specifically on daily attendance?
Yes, ma'am, this was something that the task force agreed very early on that we needed better data on that. And even though they knew that this wasn't going to be the solution to the problem, this is what they felt they needed to better address the problem. Long term, ideally, you're gonna have this, and this was the reason that Tangipahoa Parish came and presented the last time, is that they get this attendance data on these students, and there's someone at the school level. And when a student has reached this threshold of absence, someone at the school level just looks at that student and says, is there an issue that we need to be concerned about? Let the parent know, hey, your student has missed this much instructional time. Hey, your student is at risk for this truancy measure. But that someone looks at that student individually and decides, yes, more action needs to be taken, or, oh, it's this and that this student has going on, the student is okay. But they have done a really great job of putting some of those school level systems in place that we would love to see other schools adopt as well. But the first piece they felt that they needed was to have that data in place coming through so that schools could make data-informed decisions at a student level that way.
I'm sorry, everyone. I just want to make sure I get the answer. Did they vote on it? I know you said this was as a matter of policy. Did they vote on it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Sorry, could you tell us what the vote was?
I don't recall. I can go back and look at it.
It was unanimous.
Dr. Burrow?
Thank you. First of all, I apologize for cutting you off. I thought you were done. I don't have issue with deferral here with Ms. Holloway's request. I just wanted to express the fact that there was representation. It wasn't as if we didn't expect to have representation. We had the president as well as CWA officers. And further, this is something that in informal conversations I've had with several of you, we want to solve. And then I step across the street, and then they're asking me about truancy rates, and they're asking me about attendance, and so we have to solve this. And when we're talking about Girl Scout retreats or religious events, there is a point where we just have to know, what % of the time is the kid at school. Particularly in our state where we've been long challenged academically. And so I don't take issue with the need to defer. I'm happy to visit with superintendents, have more meetings. But ultimately, if we want to solve this, we're going to have to get to a place where we have clean data. We do not have it now, and we cannot make other policy or practice decisions until we have clean data. And so I'll take my level of ownership for not getting us there, and we'll work some more on that. If we want to solve for this, at some point we've got to set a mark that we want to get there, and that's where we said, okay, let's give us 3 years to get there, 3 years to work out these information systems talking to each other, 3 years to work out what family resources do we need. I've got people saying we should do it tomorrow. What are you talking about 3 years? I've got people saying never do it. So at some point, if we want to solve it, we're going to have to make a decision here. And I'm not opposed to deferral. Just want to lay out there that it is something that I feel like is worthy of solve. And until we get good data, it's very difficult to solve it because it's not just school people involved. We have district attorneys, we have juvenile judges that we meet with quarterly. We have other groups that support the family that need to know this information. So we all want to be part of solving it, as Superintendent Moshe said, and hopefully that if we decide to defer, we can get there by our next meeting.
Right, thank you.
I'm sorry.
I think Dr.
I'm
Wilson was
sorry.
next.
Ms. Townsend, is there been any work to look at the legislation? So I really appreciate the comments relative to the degrees of truancy. And I know there are families in the room that skirt the line, right, for whatever reason, where, so I think if we knew, right, if I was able to look at a child and say, this is a potentially truant child, and I need to pay closer attention to them, right? I mean, I have some students who I tell them, you need to come tell me hello every morning, because I need to know you're at school, right? And so it's a small intervention. A fellow administrator was like, who's that? I'm like, well, we're working on him coming to school, right? So those are things, like if somebody's potentially truant, I can put some things in place. But I think we also need to look at, hey, sometimes these problems get solved. And we need a way to talk about the problem solved, because the way that it exists now is, oh, they're truant, and then we're gonna leave it up to the court system, but we're not gonna talk about recovery or the strategies we put in place. And if we're not monitoring that, then we're not gonna be sharing out the best practices. So I am curious if there's any work that's been done across the street to help us to where we're looking at potentially truant, definitely truant. We put in interventions and we've recovered this child. This child is now coming to school, but I'm still probably gonna have him or her tell me good morning every day because they know that I'm gonna go looking for them if they don't show up. So I think we have to have a more nuanced way to talk about it to get to the serious problem, because if we can't differentiate, then our resources get spread so thin, and I may be chasing down the child who didn't set their alarm when I should be chasing down the child that I need to connect with a social worker, right? And it's so hard in a setting to know the difference, because I don't say, all right, let's go pull all the data today, right? It's just, there's so many other things. And so I am curious if there's been any action to help address definitions across the street, is my real question.
The group did discuss this for a while, and they decided that this would be something they would revisit whenever they meet again in the fall, that we needed to get this process of collecting good data in place and then revisit that, because there wasn't an agreement, I feel, on what they think would be the solve for that, but there was continued discussion that they would like to have about legislatively what would need to happen, as well as discussion about future policy that would need to come, about how do we support districts doing minutes recovery for students who miss minutes, and they're doing good work there, that maybe it doesn't make up for the day the student missed, but they're making up the time the student missed, and that's significant. But we need more information about how districts are putting this into place and what good things are being done. Information about, or policy about, what should be done for those at-risk students, or those different kinds of things. Those are all on the task force's list of items to return to once they have some good data in place to help inform that discussion.
Okay, and then Mr. Melanson, is there, since that hasn't taken place yet and the group's not, I'm feeling a sense of urgency because I want kids in school, right? I don't want them in jail, I don't want them on the streets, I want kids in school. So I feel that sense of urgency, and I feel the tug on the board. Is there any existing pre-filed bill that would come anywhere close that we might go make a friend real quick and see what we can pull off?
Input, similar to the discussions happening here.
So I feel like we have to figure out how to solve the data problem, but I also feel like we've got a state law problem that's helping us, it's keeping us from differentiating the way we need to. So, thank you.
Great. Ms. Abigail Clifton has comment.
I think some of our problem also is that the amount of days that the student can miss to be truant is far too little. 5 days, I know personally that a kid, a semester is a long time. It's quite a few days. And I know as a kid, there are activities that I want to do that do happen within those days, so that's a lot of days. And they may not be considered excused, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to school consecutively in those days. The rest of it, 9 weeks is half a semester. So if you add that to, that's about 60 days that you are, and 5 days that you miss is not as substantial as many people believe. But since we're in a classroom, we understand that 5 days is far too little to be considered true. At this point, yes, I have gotten a letter saying that I would be considered a truant. And I can assure that I go to school well.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Copeland. Ms. Holloway.
Thank you. That was great. So, actually, it is not to downgrade the task force of doing, a good job. But as you can tell, that things have festered once the recommendation came and people began to think about truancy, as Ms. Foche talked about, the differentiation. Dr. Bofier about that word. And we want valid data, Mr. Morris, and how you get to that point. And so my recommendation to get to that point is having these conversations about what does this look like? And we want accurate information. And we want differentiation amongst students, as she was talking about. So therefore, I'm asking for a deferment of this 7.1 to June.
That's a motion by Ms. Holloway. Is there a second to that motion? Ms. Morris Jones seconds the motion. You have a comment, Mr. Gordon?
Yeah, before we leave this issue, before Ms. Hunt gets up, let me ask, what is the typical ramification for the typical truant student? What, do they usually go before a judge, for the judge to ask them what is their plan to fix their truancy? Or is it, what usually happens?
It depends on the district, it depends on the DA, it depends on the judge.
Do you have any feel for what is the usual thing that happens?
I think usually it's the worst cases that are brought. I mean, because remember, truancy, it's not the student, truancy is on the parent. It's the parents who need to send their child to school. So it's the parent who's held accountable for truancy, not the child.
Ms. Jones, mic, please.
Oh, sorry, that was on. Maybe I wasn't close enough to it.
So for the 40% of students that are truant, does that mean 40% of our parents have to go before a judge to explain what's happening?
Yeah,
why there's a problem?
If everyone was following the law, that's what would happen, but I seriously doubt that that is what is happening. I don't think that 40% of our parents have gone before a judge to discuss the truancy of their child. No.
Do you think it's more like 10% or more like 1%?
I would guess one, but we're guessing. I'm guessing.
So if the parents never have to, if 99% of the parents of truant children never have to go before anyone to explain why there's a problem, what good is it going to do us to figure out which students are truant and which students aren't truant if nothing's happening? Yes, please.
Is there a child welfare and attendance person here?
Ms. Davis, do you like to?
I just looked at the law, by the way, and one of the provisions in the law is that after the third unexcused absence, a $50 fine can be implemented. The child's driver's license can be taken away. And after the third offense, a letter is sent home to the parent, which has to be signed for, which might be the letter you're referring to. And that's not consecutive unexcused absence. So that can occur any time during the semester. And they could be considered possibly truant or nearing being truant after the third offense. Then after the fifth unexcused absence, again, not consecutive, that is considered truant or tardy.
Have you ever heard of a $50 fine actually being imposed in
I
practice?
haven't, but I read it in the statute.
And what percentage would you say of the truant parents?
A low percentage. We have, in many districts, you meet with your local DA and judges and try to work for a program. The judges and the DA do not want us to refer, for example, Disney World gets crowded at holiday times, right? We have more and more parents that'll take their kids out of school an entire week and go on vacation. Well, that's not an excuse. We can't excuse a vacation. So that kid becomes truant immediately. Well, that's not a kid. We go through the process of how you make up the work, what you do, all this kind of stuff with them. But that's not a child or a parent we're going to refer, yet they're in that 40%. How many of that 40% are things that I've been talking about, like retreats or travel teams or parents taking kids on vacations or whatever the case may be. I don't know. But I do know that when we meet with our judicial system, and that's last resort, because we do, like Dr. Volke's talking about, the interventions first. You know, we try to contact them, we try to connect them with any kind of family services and social services that may be where parents have barriers to sending their kids. We make sure they have the uniforms, make sure they have the supplies. We send buses back to get them. All of the districts have their own ways of doing it. When parents don't respond, and this is particularly true in your elementary and middle schools, when parents don't respond, that's the ones, you know, we take to the court system, and then they'll do things like fines or whatever they feel the pressure points can be that they will do. But they have asked us repeatedly with their dockets, don't send people or don't send families unless we're sure that no other means has worked. So, to Mr. Garvey, your question, I'm sure you're going to have a very low percentage that's going before them. But I think that low percentage is increasing because, to Mr. Morris's point, we have more and more kids who are ignoring these things, especially the teenagers, because their parents are not in control of them in many cases. And the problem comes in the parent of that teenager. If they're going before the judicial system, if we've tried everything, we can't get them to come each day, the parent will go, I can't do anything at this point. So that's where your difficult, really difficult population is. I mean, I would say we need a data system that's first going to identify the real problems and not spin our wheels on the ones that are not. And then the measures that we need to take place, it's got to be the cooperative effort with the judicial system and the school mental health and behavioral health resource services. The data is important to differentiate and identify. I mean, if I would be taking this on, that's the first thing I would do. We know what the numbers are with the truancy numbers, with the strict 5 unexcused absences and 5 unexcused tardies. We know what those numbers are. It's 40-something%. At any given point, we can take our data system and they can, you know, we can upload a file. We can have at any given time, you can have the cumulative amount of days these kids have been absent or tardy because we put them into the system every day. We just don't necessarily upload. That's the problem. I don't think this necessarily fixes the problem. The problem is, I think, if we're really trying to identify what the kids are, the type of reporting needs to be different. And that's going to take some time. And that, to me, is where we should have a group of people sitting down and figuring out what that would be. That's just fine.
So are you saying that, you're saying the reporting needs to be different?
Yeah.
Are you saying that maybe there should be different levels of truancy that are tracked?
Well, I don't know about.
Or different severities of truancy?
I think we have to identify real truants, not kids whose parents drop them off late every day, or not kids whose families, you know, they're out a day here, a day there because they're sick or whatever, and then the parents take them on a 5-day vacation. And the number of kids that we have truant by the strict definition of the law, the first month of school is unbelievable. And I do think there needs to be ways to differentiate. And we only do it, I guess, you know, we have the data at each school, but then our principals and our administrators are looking at which kids, they'll look at that data and then they send to us at the central office which kids they know are trouble or which kids they know are actually truant. And those are the kids we work with. We don't work with the other ones until that principal says, look, there's a problem here. That's not just something that is, you know, that we would not go to the next step. They would handle it.
I guess my next question would be for the superintendent. Is there a way to track these different severities of truancy that Ms. Bochet is talking about?
I'm looking to Joe here because I don't know if the law allows that.
No, it doesn't. That would take off a change in the law.
It would take a change in the law for us to track things differently? Can't we label different truancies, different things in our data collection process, regardless of what the law says?
Yes, but it doesn't change the fact that the law says you're truant after 5 days of unexcused absence.
I understand that, but if we're trying to track the really bad situations, as Ms. Bochet described them, then I think we need to track the really bad situations, separate from the not so bad situations. And so I'm asking, can we track them? Can we differentiate between them?
Maybe that's where, I mean, this is where locals within their own community, as the negotiator pointed out, can make decisions. I mean, but for us, I mean, what is okay truancy? Is it a 4-day vacation, not a 5-day vacation? I mean, these are things that would have to be discussed, but I'm assuming in St. Bernard that they would be able to know, well, this is a kid that is experiencing a real challenge. This isn't a kid that's maybe going on excessive extracurricular activities. And they're probably not sending the kid who's going on additional extracurricular activities with an A average to the DA. You know, you're probably sending the kid that's...
Shortage young lady hasn't been sent to the...
Yeah, the kid that's failing. So that's where there is the ability for local differentiation. But the law remains truant unless we change the law.
So are you saying that the system as you're proposing will not be able to differentiate? As Ms. Bochet is saying, it would be helpful to differentiate?
I think we need a ruling.
Just follow up a second, okay? We're looking at a 3-year implementation to get a daily, a daily attendance. We take daily attendance. We enter it into the student information system. Locally, I have my own daily attendance. Now, if I wanted to, and I could upload it every day to the state, and right now the state would have a daily attendance because we have a capability. So I don't think the issue is what is described here that's going to really help, because we know what the daily attendance is every day, and we know it on a cumulative basis. The problem that comes in, is this a local issue or is this a state issue? What are we going to do with the state? Okay, we got this data, and are we going to have truancy programs statewide? I mean, or are we going to talk about how we as districts are going to address the truancy issue? And I understand the law has this definition of truancy that personally I think is outdated. I mean, it's much too restrictive. And we can't change it, I get it. So if the legislature or anybody out there says, what is the percent of truancy? It's going to be this 40%. That's an unrealistic and to me a misleading statistic. By definition and letter of the law, they are truant. In reality, I don't think that is affecting the educational progress of all of these kids. So then how do we then, the issue becomes, how do we then, as a state, establish a policy for locals to follow that we can make some internal differentiation, hopefully with the idea of getting some legislation updated a little bit along with it. But personally, if we pass, if we pass this thing, I don't think it can do any good whatsoever. To me, it's just, we're taking the words exempted out and we're saying that they can be excused absences, and this tells you the district decides pretty much what some excused absences. but we can do a daily attendance, any day we want to do a daily attendance. If you say to the districts, upload your data, I don't know, every month or every week. You can pull it out of the student information system. It's pulled out at the end of the school year. It can be pulled out along the continuum at any time. So I'm not sure if we're just not missing the mark of what we're trying to accomplish. That's all. To where if we could get a group of people together to try to see what's the goal and then how do we get there. Because we have the data right now according to the law, this definition.
Thank you, Ms. O'Shea. Ms. Holloway, would you like to call your question?
Yes, I'd like to move that we defer.
All right, there's a motion to defer. We've had some robust conversations. Are there any objections to the motion to defer? There are no objections to the motion to defer. The motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 57, item 7.2, consideration of revisions to bulletins regarding effective dates for computer science courses as a foreign language. The recommendation is to approve as notice of intent and emergency rule revisions to bulletins 741 and 741 non-public. That will be effective April 20th.
All right, I have a motion to approve, please. Ms. Holloway, is there a second? Ms. Busher? All right, is there a presentation?
No, this just sets the timeline and establishes the cohort for which this particular law can begin.
All right, any objection to the
I
motion?
just have a question. So what we're saying with this policy, this does not come into effect until next year's freshman class?
So it's for students graduating during or after the 26-27 school year and beyond.
So that's next year's freshman? Next year's freshman would be
This year's-
24, 5, 6, 7.
That's right, yeah.
So it's next year's freshman. I hate to, I mean, I don't know what that would mess up. Same reason why we're waiting so long on it. To be, if someone is really into the computer science and they can do it within their current 4 years or within the next couple of years, that they wouldn't be able to make that substitution now.
Dr. Sanders, you want to address that?
Or does it have to be the policy or recognition inside? I'm not sure.
Attorney Singleton, that the delay was because that's how it was put in statute from the legislature. And then with the TOPS rules, they always start with their cohort class.
So it's a legislative delay?
Yes.
Any questions, comments, any objections? All right, motion passes. Next item.
Your next item is on page 61, item 8.1, consideration of an update report regarding accountability and graduation requirements for English learners. The recommendation is to receive the report and direct the LDOE to report back at the appropriate time regarding recommendations for updates to state level English learner strategy.
All right, there's a motion to receive the report. Can I get a motion to receive the report? Dr. Loping, second Ms. Holloway. All right, report, Dr. Loping.
Yeah, I'll just make note that coming out of our last meeting, there were essentially two different asks of us. One was the board was considering a waiver for EL students for this particular year. We visited with council on this particular issue, and we do not believe that this board has the ability to issue that waiver. And as a result of that, then for us, that gives us a little more time to think about what policy needs to look like moving forward. This is a very big decision, and this is certainly sensitive on every side of this particular issue. And so what we want to do is make sure that we get this right. And I don't just think it's changing the requirements to graduate. I mean, I think it's about supports in our elementary schools. It's about how funds flow to support these students. It's about personnel. It's about our cultivation of a teaching force that can work with a particular subgroup. And so we have spent a few weeks since the last meeting, but on a short timeline, studying this issue. And the group, the Excel group, has done a really good job of providing information, offering solutions. We just think that given
the magnitude of this particular decision, and we want to make sure that we take the time to get this right. And so we're just asking for additional time on the second piece, which is the development of a long-term protocol that improves graduation rates for our English language learners.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Brumley. Any comments, questions? First from the board, we have a number of public comment cards. I'll go through those. We have none from the board just yet. All right. We'll start with those who do not wish to speak. So that we'll make a record of those. Monique Roberts supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Sai Duga supports the recommendation but does not wish to speak. Monica Perry supports the recommendation, does not wish to speak. Laura Warner supports the recommendation, does not wish to speak. Kristen Boren supports the recommendation, does not wish to speak. I think it's Luanda Narcy supports the recommendation, does not wish to speak. And Jamal Howard supports the recommendation, does not wish to speak. And then we have a number of cards. And we'll kick off with Sandra Duarte. If you want to make your way forward, you can come forward. Caitlin DeVille, likewise, supports the recommendation, wishes to speak. If you would make your way forward. Angela Ramirez. Let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3. And then if we can get Taruba Chavez, who also supports the recommendation and wishes to speak. Now get forward. If all 4 of you would take a seat at the table, we'll start first with Ms. Duarte.
That's tough, I'm sorry. I didn't really have anything much to prepare, so I'll be quick and speak from my heart. I'm here representing, I'm sorry?
Push a little green button right on that microphone and pull it close to you.
I'm sorry. My name is Sandra Duarte, and I am representing the BL population from Einstein Charter Schools in New Orleans East. I'm here just to kind of voice out some of these students that are coming into our school system in our district. Some of these students that are coming in from foreign countries late into high school. And they're coming in with a goal. They want to get an education. They made a journey to be here to get that education, and it's disheartening when we can't give it to them. It's disheartening when we say, you've got to pass this leap about social studies that you know nothing about, and you've got to pass it within a year. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to have a diploma and continue your education. I do feel that we have a lot of students that they know that they're not going to get a diploma, but they're still in school. We're talking about these kids that shouldn't be in the street. They want to be in school. And it's disheartening when they do, but they don't get a diploma at the end of the school year. So I'm here to support that and allow these ladies that have done a great job with Excel to give you more information about that.
Thank you, Ms. Duarte. Caitlin DeVille.
Hi, my name is Caitlin DeVille. I'm the high school ESL coach for Calhoun Parish School District. Louisiana currently has the lowest graduation rate of English learners in the nation. This harms individuals by putting an economic barrier in front of would-be graduates, but also encumbers schools and school districts. With human and capital resources stretched thin, it is difficult for administrators and school districts to rally behind a group by allocating limited resource to push them to pass exams science say they can't pass. The science and education communities accept that it takes 7 years to become academically fluent in a language. The LEAP does not separate content mastery from language proficiency and therefore is not a reliable measure of either. Students who arrive in 7th grade or later do not have 7 years to become proficient in language during their K-12 education. We're asking these students to defy science and pass an exam their brains are not ready for. The Excel proposal does not weaken the distinction of a high school diploma in Louisiana. A portfolio project can show the same mastering of standards as an exam. The ELP shows language proficiency trajectory. We already have a testing component in place to show if students are mastering the language. We can now place a portfolio system in place to ensure content mastery. With both of these measures in place, we can be confident in sending graduates out into the state. Although we are not the only state to require standardized test performance for graduation, we are the only state that does not have expanded pathways for English learners. Workforce readiness can be measured by growth on the English language proficiency test, as well as workforce credentials gained from dual enrollment courses and Jumpstart diploma. In Calcasieu, our Ls have earned workforce credentials, including customer service, ServSafe, and CER core and electrical certifications. Students are becoming workforce ready. Let's let them earn a diploma that proves it. Legally, we must offer a standard Jumpstart or TOPS diploma to this population. The school takes a hit on SBS and students denied a diploma when we accept that HiSET is the only path for which they are suited. With labor shortage, we are hurting our state by not allowing students a path to graduate. 50% of Calcasieu Parish 12th grade Ls are not currently on track to graduate. 70% of those are only missing the graduation mark due to LEAP testing. I recently spoke to one of my senior Ls. She came in with very little English in 2020, but now she speaks beautiful English but may not graduate due to one exam. Giving our students the opportunity to graduate helps individuals, school systems, and our state. Thank you for considering the Excel graduation pathway.
Great, thank you, ma'am. Angela Ramirez.
Thank you. I am the Executive Director of Fuentes New Orleans. It is a nonprofit that focuses exclusively on Latinx immigrant success. I am also the Spanish Program Director of Tulane University. So on a daily basis, I can witness for myself the immense benefits and advantages of being bilingual, but I am also looking every single day the challenges and the struggles that come with that path of becoming proficient in a second language. So given my line of work, given that the fact that I was an ELL once, I am here to support Excel pathway to graduation. I'm here to ask you not to ignore those additional challenges that ELs face when presenting the LEAP exam. The law certainly doesn't. Louisiana law recognizes that it takes 7 years to become fully proficient, yet we expect newcomers to pass this exam without giving them an alternative path that would give them the opportunity to get their high school diplomas. Excel expands graduation eligibility for recently arrived immigrant students. It doesn't extend students to take any assessments. The Excel proposal does not weaken the distinction of a high school diploma in Louisiana. We want these kids to continue forming themselves in community colleges, four-year colleges, technical institutions. But these kids are extremely capable. They just need that high school diploma to continue learning and continue forming themselves. If these kids advance economically, the entire state advances economically. It is in our best interest that these kids get better, higher paying wages, and in order to do so, they need this diploma. With the labor shortage in Louisiana and employers actively searching for talented, young, bilingual workforce, because let's not forget that the Hispanic population in Louisiana has tripled since 2020. So for all these reasons, I'm here to support Excel, and I urge you, and I implore you to look or have a consideration of what the law says about how long it takes to be proficient in another language.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. Next up, we have Ms. Chiruba Chavez. And in the meantime, I'd also like to invite up Lane Edelman, Dr. Eric Atkins, and Gerald Como. You could make your way forward as well. Ms. Chavez, you may proceed.
Good morning, my name is Chiruba Chavez, co-founder of the Excel Graduation Pathway Coalition. Last month, my colleague Emma and I presented to you a challenge that we trust this board to solve. That there is one subgroup in Louisiana that is graduating at a rate half of their peers. We have presented to you the research that this is a problem unique to our state, as other test requiring states have acknowledged exams written in another language that someone is learning is an invalid measure of content mastery. We also compiled the data. The 2 years of COVID waivers showed that only the English learner subgroup experienced a drastic jump in graduation rates when this one variable was eliminated. A 3-point increase statewide, 11-point jump for English learners. In other parishes in East Baton Rouge, 5-point increase in the parish, 22 points for English learners. This is the only subgroup that can claim this level of disproportionality indicative of this exam's disparate impact on the small group of students. We also engage with stakeholders. Advocacy organizations believe that Excel is one step closer to equity for this group of students. Business groups have expressed to us that LEAP is an artificial barrier that inhibits capable students from entering the workforce. With the research of other states, Louisiana data, stakeholder input, we then proposed the Excel graduation pathway, and today we ask you to consider and to pass Excel with urgency. We know that Excel is just the first step. It makes graduation possible. We hope that after Excel, we can continue discussions around instructional practices, programmatic recommendations, district, school-based guidance. However, Excel must be passed first. I cannot in good faith sit and co-plan with teachers, talk about comprehensible input, remind math teachers that our kids are familiar only with the metric system, remind ELA teachers to include culturally responsive texts in their text sets when they're seeing one less English learner on their roster every day. I cannot, in good faith, talk to an elementary ESL class about post-secondary opportunities here in America that is possible with hard work and education, but their older brothers and sisters are dropping out and they have not yet seen someone who looks like them in a high school graduation. Schools don't just know the 41% of English learners who graduate, they know the 59% of English learners who don't. And they see the days that students stop coming to school. They know that with Excel, a possibility of graduation will instill hope in students and keep them coming back every day. So I ask you today on behalf of seniors in Louisiana who are Excel eligible, 7 seniors in Calcasieu, at least 11 in Lafayette, 45 seniors in East Baton Rouge, 92 in Jefferson Parish, and others across the state who are still in school despite statistics telling them that they cannot graduate, to consider and pass Excel with urgency. Thank you.
Great, thank you, ma'am. The remainder of the speakers will introduce themselves and we can proceed in the order in which I call them.
Good morning. My name is Lane Edelman. I'm principal at Acadiana High School. Our school has over 150 EL students. 18 of those are proud members of the class of 2023. 3 of those are Tufts University and 15 are on the Jumpstart diploma track. So far, our EL students have earned 98 regional and state credentials, proving that they are workforce ready. From our EL population, 14 have earned college credit while still walking our halls. 5 of these members of the class of 2023 have satisfactorily completed all of the coursework necessary to walk the stage next month, with the exception of passing 1 leap. This shows their mastery of content, but they have been unable to pass the test due to their limited English proficiency. Data has proven it takes 7 years to become fully English proficient. The state of Louisiana has no English language proficiency requirement for graduation in accordance with the law. Yet we have students failing to graduate because of their inability to master the English language due to their newcomer status to the U.S. In analyzing one English LEAP release test item, our team identified 19 terms that could not be found in the word-to-word Spanish dictionary. This dictionary is the only aid that an EL student has to supposedly level the playing field with their native English-speaking peers. It's simply a discriminatory practice to require students to take a test in a foreign language in which the one tool they can utilize is rendered useless because it fails to contain the complex vocabulary necessary to provide them with a basic understanding of what the question is even asking. This practice is proving to stakeholders that mastery of content standards is not the most important aspect of public education. but rather that a student's limited English proficiency should be a barrier to their educational achievement. The U.S. Department of Education requires the school system to remove such barriers for EL students achieving educational success. I ask that you consider the children that are the root of this discussion today. Allow them to submit alternative forms of assessment through a portfolio of work samples to prove their mastery of course content to satisfy their last graduation requirement. Holding them to one test that measures more of their understanding of the complex English language than the course content that is actually designed to measure is not an appropriate assessment tool. It's been said that giving a diploma to those students that don't understand English might hurt the economy. These students are already assisting in our school offices, advocating for their classmates in discussions with school and district personnel, and even speaking at Bessie last month. They are the liaisons between native English speakers and EL families to enable all stakeholders to have a voice within our schools. They hold jobs, have shown their workforce and college ready through credentials, coursework, and college exams, and they're positively impacting the state of Louisiana every single day. They have proven they have mastered course content through the rigorous instruction with their teachers and should be allowed to show that mastery in an alternative way that elite that inappropriately measures their language skills over the content standards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Dr. Erin Atkins, Assistant Principal at Indiana High School. I'm Administrator over our ESL program. Many questions have been asked in the last month regarding safety concerns of EL students graduating and entering the workforce. In reality, these potential graduates have already taken and passed a variety of credentialing exams required as industry standards, many specifically addressing safety in the industry. Lafayette Parish has 2 high schools that host EL programs to help students develop understanding and fluency in the English language. Together, we have over 350 EL students, with 178 of these students declaring a Jumpstart pathway. 96 of those Jumpstart students have earned a total of 192 industry-based credentials, including FEMA, Basic Life Support, and OSHA 10, with the most successful IPCs being SP2 and Microsoft Word. Our most popular pathway choices for these students are manufacturing and construction, architecture, and business management. In addition to our Jumpstart students, we have 69 students between our 2 high schools that are on the top university track. At Educator High School, 14 of our 20 English language learners that are juniors and seniors have already earned college credit. However, of all these accomplishments, 11 of these same students have only been unsuccessful in one requirement, the LEAP exam. They have been given inappropriate accommodations to attempt to level the playing field to that of their peers, but these accommodations do not provide adequate support. On one English LEAP released item, 19 of the words in the prompt cannot be found in their word-to-word dictionary, the one tool they're allowed to use on this assessment. While our assessments should challenge our students, they should not create a disadvantage for any group of students. Factoring language proficiency into assessment, regardless of content, makes the results of the assessment unreliable and invalid. The assessment simply no longer measures what it was intended to measure. Yet we still require passing score on the sleep test, despite all other accomplishments these students have earned, in order for them to be a graduate of our high schools. Title VI states that no person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. The Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974 prohibits discrimination against students and requires school districts and state's Department of Education to take action to ensure participation for everyone, including removing language barriers for EL students. To know that this discriminatory practice is taking place in our educational system and to sit idle or move lackadaisically towards a solution is to continue to oppress these students who have demonstrated proficiency and mastered the content in every course they have completed. If you took the time to talk to these students as a member of our educational system or as a prospective employer, you would not have any doubts of their capabilities. These children simply have not had the decades of exposure and practice with English vocabulary that their peers have had, yet they are still expected to meet the same criteria on standardized tests. As an educational system, we have to do a better job for our students.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Cole.
Good morning. My name is Gerald Como, Assistant Principal at Lafayette High, and a recently retired 256 Infantry Brigade Command Sergeant Major. With 3 combat tours in Iraq, I know the benefit firsthand of a bilingual soldier, along with diverse leadership. This is why the Military Recruiting Command has made a shift toward getting these soldiers in our ranks. In an article, Path of Non-Native English Speakers to Join the Air Force by Kim Lane, Aaron complete the Defense Language Institute English Language Center's ECHO program beta test, which replicate a program ran by the Army since the 70s. The program helps recruits improve their English language skills to the point where they can complete basic training. In a 2022 article, the U.S. Army provides a pathway for foreign language speaker applicants. Captain Figgs, U.S. Army recruit, public affairs officer, writes, "There's a training available for applicants who do not meet foreign language recruiting initiative criteria. These applicants enlist up front in the military skills which make basic training after completion of DSL training." Captain Figgs states, "We recognize that the importance of the applicants who are not dominant English speakers to know the skills that they implement in our language. The purpose of to achieve their dream through the U.S. Army. However, the future leaders still need a high school diploma to complete this process."
Thank you. Great. Thank you, sir. From Heidi Dressler, Jan Scott Reshore, Scarlett Amaya, and Alexandra Sanchez. Please come forward. Again, please introduce yourselves before you begin to give your remarks.
How do you turn it on?
Is it green?
It's green.
Great.
Okay.
Close to you so we can hear you.
All right. I'm Heidi Dressler from Acadiana High School. The Louisiana Department of Education website says the following: English learners come from diverse backgrounds, both culturally and linguistically. They bring to their learning a vast set of experiences and knowledge base as they engage in the learning process in a new language. Louisiana believes English learners, like all their students, can achieve academic success through a clear and concise alignment of quality standards, instructional programs, and resources, professional development, and assessments. High-quality instruction for ELs requires language acquisition to occur across all content areas, all day, every day. The English Learner Guidebook helps students to differentiate instruction and supports to meet individual needs of students. The guidebook calls for additional targeted support by having teachers differentiate instruction for students, flexible grouping, sheltered instruction, tiered assignments, and scaffolds for learning in collaboration with support staff. Strategy 2 in the guidebook is a progress monitoring as an ongoing practice to support and accelerate instruction. Progress monitoring is not just the process of collecting data from various sources, but more importantly, it teaches collaborating, discussing student work, and analyzing results to decide what's next. While students are still in EL status, this allows regular education and EL teachers the opportunity to collaborate to determine how to monitor student progress and adjust instructional practices and supports as necessary. Prior to exiting EL status, the guidebook calls for an individual learning plan identifying learning targets and modifying supports based on the results of the ELT. The integration of content and language teaching is critical for English learners to develop the academic skills necessary to be successful in meeting high standards. However, teaching must be adapted for these students to access grade level content material and to develop the specific academic language required in school settings. The strategies described emphasize components that are research-based and proven when implemented well to change the educational outcomes of English learners. The LEAP exam is, unfortunately, a one-size-fits-all exam, allowing limited accommodations, such as the word-to-word dictionary and extended time. We differentiate instruction for EL learners and then hold the students who are at a disadvantage due to a lack of time to test that is much more than just a test of content knowledge or English proficiency. It has been said that it takes 7 years to acquire language. Our students come in with much less time than that, and we are requiring them to pass this one-size-fits-all exam in order to achieve their dream of obtaining a high school diploma. This prevents them from furthering their education and limiting the opportunities available to them as they enter our workforce.
Thank you, Ms. Dressler.
I'm assuming it's on?
It's on. Awesome. Great.
First, let me introduce myself. I'm Mayor J.S. Scott, Richard, City of Scott, Boudin capital of the world. First, I want to thank all of you for your service.
Did you bring any?
Disappointed.
Next speaker, please.
Let me make a call, probably to get some shit. I want to thank you for your service. I'm thinking about maybe coming to more Bessie board meetings. They're more interesting than some of my council meetings. But again, I'm here to speak on behalf of the Spanish students. I am a coach at Educator High School. I will be stepping down this year after 15 years of service at Educator High School. Lucky to work under the leadership of Ms. Edelman and Mr. David Lejeune. I am married to a Colombian woman. I have 2 biracial children. My in-laws are immigrants from Colombia. They raised 2 daughters of the 4 who were immigrants as well. And so I'm kind of going to speak from the heart. My immigrants still, at 83 years old, do not speak English well. They do not speak English well at all. But he was a successful businessman. He had a business for 25 years in Orlando. He raised 4 daughters and sent them all through state college at Florida, 2 at the University of Florida, 2 at Florida State University. This past year, just recently, I coached over 50% of my soccer team were Spanish kids. And so we're going to sit here and determine whether a standardized test is going to show what they're capable of. Many of them didn't speak English at all. And so there was an obvious language barrier for me, who doesn't speak Spanish. Luckily, I was able to have some coaches that were able to do it. But as a parent of 2 biracial children and married to immigrants who came in this country to pursue the American dream, that's what we're all here for. Every single person in this room came here to pursue the American dream. And to have the opportunity to maybe sit on this board, to run for mayor, to be a school teacher, to be an administrator, to be a farmer, to be whatever it may be. We all had that opportunity. Every single one of us in this room was given that opportunity. And we weren't denied it because we were American, and neither should these. Neither should these kids who are immigrants or whose parents chose to come here to pursue the American dream. Standardized testing, just to be transparent and pretty blunt, I think is a joke. I did not do well on standardized testing as a student. My wife didn't do well on standardized testing as a student. We're both college graduates. I'm the mayor, not because I'm smart. I'm the mayor because I had grit, and I had determination, and I had goals, and I had dreams. And I think all the Spanish students, and I'm talking all immigrants, I'm speaking for all immigrants, want the American dream. And they want the opportunity to receive the American dream. And that diploma does a lot towards giving them that opportunity. If we deny that based on a test, we're doing them an injustice. We really are doing them an injustice. It is incumbent upon us as elected officials to represent the whole and not the part. I say it every day. I represent everyone in my community. All of them. Every day, all the time. And it is incumbent upon you as elected officials to represent the whole and not the part. I'll end with this. Standardized tests, however, have never been accurate and reliable measures of student learning. Here's what it means to me. Standardized test scores are just one point of data, not the full picture. And they can't capture drive, grit, and/or ambition. Tests can't measure the support of parents who believe in you and will fight for opportunities when you're too little to fight for yourself. Tests can't measure the value of a teacher or an administrator who helps you to believe in yourself. Standardized tests have become the most effective racist weapon ever devised to objectively degrade any foreign minds and legally exclude their bodies from achieving the opportunity to reach the American dream. Thank you for your time.
Yes, Scott, excuse me, I just need to ask, was your dad Eddie?
My dad.
I'm just asking, is that you and Eddie Richard from Scott?
So Eddie Richard is my great uncle. My grandfather and Eddie were brothers.
Got it, good people.
Yeah, Eddie was the former mayor of Scott.
That's it,
Carry
okay.
on the legacy.
Great,
Thank you again for your time.
Congratulations to you and your family.
So we have Ms. Amaya and Ms. Sanchez, but in the meantime, with Taylor Castile and Ginger Richard also make their way forward. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Scarlett Amaya. I am from Honduras. I am 16 years old. I came to the United States in 2021. Wanted to achieve my goals, and that's one of the reasons why I want to be here. I went migrate to the United States. No one know about this. I became one of many caravans of immigrants alone. The journey took 3 months to come to New Orleans. I live with my mom, and my dad is in Honduras. I came here because I want better future for myself. And the best way for me to have my best future is by learning more English to the students as psychologists. Achieve my goals and help the Latino community. Every day for me is opportunity to discover new words. I think that's for each student who is now to the United States. They are here in school working hard for better future, even with I know the difficult things they have seen. I even have friends who are new to the United States with jobs at night, and they come to the school during the day for a better future. So many are here. What is parents of money from or parents de la Sierra? No commerce program has been very helpful of Latinos in our journey. My reason for wanting to stay here, I go to the university, is to fight for a better education. But for me and for my people, I want to show the world that I can reach my dreams. Like today, I'm leading one of my dreams, like standing here protesting for opportunity, for more opportunity for my people. Right now, my GPA is 3.5. I come to school every day to learn more English. But it's not fair that a student who are now to the United States must pass the LEAD exams to graduate. Last year, I took the algebra, English, and biology. I only passed the algebra. Yes. I'm in 11th grade. My fear is I was not graduate because of two tests, but I already finished 1 year of school in Honduras, and now 2 years here. Thank you for the time today. I am hope to say thank you to you in the future for changing this policy for new students to the United States.
Hi, good morning. My name is Alexandra Sanchez. I'm a senior in George Washington Carver in New Orleans. From Honduras in 2003, my immigrant parents, like many others, took the opportunity for me to be born in the United States. I'll admit, my parents do not have a high school diploma, but my mother owns and runs her own restaurant, Chocolate Grill, in New Orleans that has been successful and lucrative business for 7 years. At Carver, I've witnessed the opportunities La Sierra has brought to the immigrant community by helping adapt. I am so proud and grateful to see my sister standing today speaking up not only for herself but for Latino immigrants in Louisiana. She's arrived to the country at the exams even though he passed all her classes. I ask of you today to take into consideration the appeal of these exams and allow high school immigrants to be excused of the unjust weak exams as a requirement for their graduation.
Thank you.
Good morning, members of SC, Superintendent Brumley. My name is Ginger Richard, Supervisor of Language Acquisition for Lafayette Parish School System. I come today in support of the XL graduation pathway, which expands graduation eligibility for recently arrived immigrant students. I'm hoping that we can all agree on one thing. Our English learners are at a disadvantage when we look at current graduation requirements in regards to LEAP 2025 exams. Currently, we are expecting these students to pass the LEAP exam prior to becoming proficient in the English language. Throughout our multiple conversations, we have heard multiple testimonies from students and schools, and this is just a select few from our state of Louisiana. Our English learner population is increasing by the day. In Lafayette Parish alone, as of today, we have 2,072 English learners registered as opposed to 1,200 in 2015. This is an issue that is not going away, and it's time for our state to acknowledge the urgency and work together with stakeholders to find a solution. I would appreciate your continued support and conversations regarding policy changes for our students, our English learners in the state of Louisiana.
Mr. Castillo.
Yes, greetings and good morning, board members. My name is Taylor Castillo. I'm chief of staff for a advocacy group in New Orleans called Our Voice Nuestra Voz. I'm glad to be up here speaking to you all again. I spoke last month as well. And just seeing that progress is being made on this much needed and long overdue policy. At Our Voice, we work with parents and community members so they can better advocate for their students. We've worked with countless limited English proficiency families over the years who have faced this exact barrier that are preventing their students from graduating. We've seen students who work hard, put in the extra hours, who pass their classes, yet fail the state exams over and over and over, sometimes just a single exam that they take 3-4 times. Families are frustrated and don't know what more to do because the issue isn't knowledge of the subject, it's not the work ethic, the issue is a physical limitation in the 7 years that it takes to become proficient in a language. Guidelines from the U.S. Department of Education and the Office of Civil Rights stress that districts must ensure that there are no structural barriers for students who are English learners. This proposed alternative pathway would take down this very real barrier. It is something other states have already implemented to great success, and Louisiana must do so too. Not just to come in line with these guidelines, but so that all students have the opportunity to thrive and secure the future they've been working towards. Thank you.
We have 4 more cards. Genesis Garcia, Nadia Martinez, Danica Mossman, and Emma Merrill. We've got 2. Let's see. All right, would you introduce yourself and proceed, please?
Of course. My name is Genesis Garcia. I just want to say hello to all educators, these members, and coalition members. I am honored to be speaking to you today as a mother, educator, U.S. citizen, but especially as an immigrant. No? Oh, I'm sorry. Now, can you hear me better? Oh, so much better. Okay. Hola. Hello to all the members today in DC.
educators and coalition members, I am honored to be speaking to you today. As a mother, educator, U.S. citizen, but especially as an immigrant, I strongly support the proposal to allow English language learner students who have been in the United States for less than 7 years to demonstrate the mastery of content standards through a portfolio of word samples. It is unfair to expect these students to pass the LEAP test when they are still acquiring a new language. Some groups are against this proposal due to the concerns about its impact on the economy. However, by providing these students with alternative assessments to obtain a high school diploma, we can provide them to succeed and contribute to the society in the ways they are capable. They are not only our future roofers, landscapers, and restaurant workers. They are also our teachers, social workers, engineers, and doctors. If English language learners, students pass all their classes, meet graduation requirements, and understand the content, then passing a single test made for native English speakers is not an accurate measure of their abilities. A test does not determine a student's ability in the workforce, and I am the proof. I am a highly effective teacher who failed the TOEFL and English language exam twice. I also failed the praxis several times due to language barrier. I have to request extra time in all my standardized tests over the past 10 years. Even with my master's degree in leadership and education that I completed last year in 2022, I have to request extra time. And I am 100% sure that without that extra time, I would have passed. While in university, I lived in the writing centers. It takes quite a long time to be proficient in a second language, especially after childhood. We're asking these students to do the impossible and become completely proficient in a few years. I know most of you have taken Spanish in high school or college for 2 or more years, and you may know very well your numbers 1 through 10, and dos tacos, por favor. But you might not be able to explain photosynthesis in a biology LEAP test in Spanish. That's the reality for most of our students right now, who, like me, did not and do not have resources such as a writing center, English tutors, and bilingual counselors. The LEAP is extremely difficult for some native English speakers because of the academic vocabulary. Imagine how difficult it will be to take in a different language even if you have mastered the content. I strongly believe that this alternative assessment should be approved by DESI, so just like me, they can have a choice and shape their future in our economy the way the best they fit. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts on this important issue. Gracias.
Good morning, members of the board, Superintendent Brumley. As you know, I'm Emma Merrill, Director of Las Sierras Academy in New Orleans and co-founder of the Excel Graduation Pathway. You've heard a ton from Ms. Chavez and I over the past year, and so I wanted you to hear the voices from some of my students because those are the voices that truly matter. Scarlett was my student last year at Las Sierras Academy Newcomer School. And like she said, she arrived in the U.S. in New Orleans at 15 years old on a 3-month journey on her own in 2021. Her first year learning English was the 21-22 school year in our intensive school for English language development. She tested out of the program within a year with 50 other students. Scarlett has credits from her 9th grade year in Honduras and hopes to graduate next year, but has failed the English and the biology LEAP exams even with a 3.5 GPA. The reality is her story is not unique. One comment that resonated with me from the last board meeting is that because LEAP scores of newcomer students don't count towards schools' SBS scores until their 3rd year in the country, we are holding students accountable to a higher bar than we are holding schools and systems accountable. We're denying students like Scarlett a diploma. We're encouraged that the department has been looking at other state policies and models, like Texas and New Jersey, and agree that we must also develop policy around instructional practices for English learners. However, this must be divorced from expanding criteria for graduation. We do have excellent EL instruction in some programs like Las Sierras, but as stated in State Bulletin, it takes 7 years, as you know, to become proficient in language. This is my area of expertise, right? And this bulletin language actually comes from nationwide research, first done in 1980 by the father of language acquisition theory. His name is Stephen Krashen. I studied this theory in college, and it still rings true today from what I see with my students. In Louisiana, 47% of English learners have met that 7-year trajectory goal, which shows 7 years as a true average, not the minimum and not the maximum. This is the discrepancy for LEAP exams being a graduation requirement for this population. We've also spoken with a number of workforce and economic development groups since the last meeting, including the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Jefferson Chamber, and the New Orleans Chamber of Commerce, who sent in a letter of support to us this morning, and business leaders and workforce development groups. The responses were all the same, saying, our workforce in Louisiana is declining. We need more students to graduate into the workforce, and LEAP is not indicative of workforce readiness. Language proficiency was not a concern. After the Texas policy was passed, the state collected employment data for students who graduated through the portfolio method. 17% entered in higher ed, and 62% joined the Texas workforce, compared to students who dropped out with only 33% being employed. We shared with the department that also every student who's an English learner has a language acquisition plan in place, and a language acquisition plan team that meets annually, and that is exactly where this graduation plan can be housed in this plan. What is more, schools already have portfolio plans in place for students who qualify for April Done, so this would not be a heavy lift. Students like Scarlett are becoming more and more common in Louisiana, and I'm honored to be in this work with you all, and ensure that she and other students like her have a pathway to graduation next year. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any additional public comment cards. Comments from the board, Dr. Bowman?
I really want to thank everyone who spoke in today, and those of you who have brought all of this to our attention, and then also thank the department for the policy brief relative to the work that you guys have done since our last meeting. There's a couple of things that I want to point to in the policy brief, but first I want to start by saying, as I've been engaging with people about this, I've done so as a principal, I've done so as a mom, I've done so as a granddaughter. Excuse my emotions. So I don't remember which one of you, because there's a lot of you that like to call, that I was on the phone with, but at some point, I was on my property. And it's property that used to belong to my great-grandparents, who spoke French. And because of the attitude of our government, we've lost the French language in our family. And now, because of a shift in our government, we're supporting schools to bring the French language back, right? So that's one life experience. Another life experience is my family hosted some kids from Finland. Now, if you really want to have some fun, you open your house to 12-year-olds from a different country. Guess what? They spoke 4 languages. So I feel like we need to shift in our country, especially when we think about countries that are high-performing and have high success rates with education. I don't need to go to Finland to study their education system, although I plan to, because I can tell you what they're doing. They're promoting languages. And the more we promote languages, the more neurons fire in our brains. So, as I have these children in my house who are sharing with me that they speak 4 languages, yet taking calls about these potential policy proposals, I just can't help but to think about the irony here, right? So, I do think we have to get to a place where we look at language as an asset. And the more languages we have, the more skills we have. So I wanted to get that out of the way, and I do apologize for the emotion there. I do also want to point out the piece in here, and there's so much, but I've learned so much being on this board. And I think as we go through this year, where it's my last year on the board, you know, I'm sure I'm going to reflect on that a lot. And one of the things that I reflect on is that I've now gotten to a place in my life where it's my personal mission to help people use their gifts to make the community better, right? Because when you can align your gift and your purpose with your daily activities, then you're not gonna drop out of school and rob me or commit murder, right? So if you can find your gift, use that gift to serve our community, then everybody benefits from that. And so I get to do that as a principal, and it's an absolute joy to do that. What I've come to realize is that by using the assessments to the extent that we use the assessments, we're blocking some people from using their gifts. So one of the individuals who's called me a lot about this is sitting right next to me, and she has, and comes at this with a very different view of assessments, right? And so, but we can still talk about that. What I have come to believe, and something that I want to point out, is in the policy brief from the department, and something that was shared through all the research that the Excel group has brought forward, is that there's other ways to do this, right? You can have the assessments, you can use the assessments, they can be powerful, and you can do other things as well. And so I do want to point in the policy brief for board members to the way Texas does it, right? So Texas gives assessments, and I think we should continue to give assessments. I don't think that they're perfect, but I think they're a powerful tool that supports our educators in driving improvement in our schools. So I want everybody to know, I believe we need to continue to give assessments. What I think we need to stop doing is giving the same assessment 7 times, right? So I don't know what the perfect number is. I'm sure there's a researcher that's figured it out. But if you're giving the same assessment to a kid 7 times, it's not a good idea, right? Like at some point it becomes abusive in my mind. I don't know what that magic number is. If I had to make one up, I'd probably say 3. Just because I believe you should take a test, and if you don't do well, I think there should be an intervention, and you should try to take a test again. And I don't even mind taking it a 3rd time. What I found out in researching this, in New York, you're not allowed to give the test more than 2 times. So we're not the first state to deal with this. So I want to point that out, right? Is that our assessments provide a powerful tool. I do want to thank the focus on the English language learners, but I think we need to realize, and this was brought up at the Superintendent's Advisory Council meeting, I believe it was Superintendent Powell who brought up the fact that there are other students who, for whatever reason, struggle with our assessments, and I want us to understand Texas has already figured out a way to do this. New Jersey has a process in place, and all of this is here in the policy brief for you guys to go and check out. And I feel like we can get to a more balanced approach that has people focused on the right things. Because the fact of the matter is, if a child has, let's say, not met the mark 3 times, we don't need to give them more exposure to Shakespeare. We need to figure out what's going to help them find their gift and get them prepared to use their gift on behalf of our community. I'm sure there's more, but I'm going to just try to stay quiet.
Thank you, Dr. Brophy. Ms. Orange-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dr. Brophy, for your comments. I agree with every word. And for the record, Madam President, you've earned the right to be emotional about anything. You actually did as women. We don't have to apologize for it. So that said, I want to thank the incredible educators, the families, the students who have taken time, and not just today. This has been a long time coming. Your advocacy, your passion, the power of your own narratives, your clarity, and your persistence, frankly, to elevate such an important issue. An issue that is important when we say, as a board and as a state, that we believe every child, when we say all children, we mean all children, right? And you have manifested that at every single stage of this journey. And so I just want to thank you for your bold, courageous leadership. And I believe this conversation is long overdue. So many days, I'm so proud to serve on this board. This is my 12th and final year on this board. And in so many days, I have the opportunity to be in other places across this country and speak about the great work happening in our state and the great work that our educators and our families do every single day to to create opportunities for our students. But on this issue, we are behind. And it is time that we make this right. On behalf of our students, on behalf of the future opportunities that every single student deserves in this state. So with that, I'd like to offer a substitute motion. One, that we receive the update report regarding accountability and graduation requirements for English learners. Two, that we direct the department to create a task force with Dr. Belinda Davis and Sharuba Chavez as co-chairs and managed by the Bessie Executive Director with support from the LDOE staff in order to study and identify the challenges among English language learners, as well as to develop and support the implementation of a statewide plan for educating English language learners. And finally, I direct the department to draft policy in close collaboration with the ELL Pathways Collaborative that provides for an appeals process as it relates to graduation assessment requirements for all students in Louisiana, using the Texas policy as a model with the enhanced rigor of the New Jersey model, and present policy at the June 2023 SAC meeting, as well as the June 2023 Academic Goals and Instructional Improvement Committee meeting.
There's a motion and a second. Any additional discussion as it relates to that substitute motion? Is there an objection to that motion? Hearing no objection to that motion passes. Before I adjourn, Ms. Holloway would like to proceed.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to refer an item to the June AGII meeting, and it's in regards to New Meridian Mathematics pilot that's going on in the state, and it's basically actually in line with what we're speaking about with assessments, and I'd like to add that to our agenda for June.
Duly noted. Thank you, Ms. Holloway.
Thank you.
All right, any additional?
Need a second.
Need a second? All right, that's a motion, second. Dr. Bowman seconds that motion. Any objection to the motion? All right, that motion passes. Anything else that you put before this committee? If not, we are adjourned and we'll return back at what time? 9 minutes, great.
So we're going to lunch.
Yeah.
And 30 minutes, is that good? 1:15, 1:15?
All right, we shall return at 1:20. Thanks, everyone. Very fair.